We are live now on YouTube, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, both here and online, and it's good to see so many people. It's a rare occasion we get such a large audience here, so there must be something of great interest this afternoon. Welcome, as I say, to this Rushcliff Borough Council's Planning Committee. As I say, it's been streamed on YouTube. I'm Councillor Roger Upton, Chairman of this committee, and on my left is, on your right, actually, Councillor Maureen Stockwood, my Vice Chairman. And I think, I'm probably getting this awfully wrong, but I think this afternoon we've had a few changes of the committee and some substitutes, but I think we've got Councillors Bailey, Butler, Gowland, Gray, Phillips, Mason, Purdue, Horan, Price, Thomas. I think I've covered everybody. Yes, good. That's from the members' point of view. And from the officers' side, we've got Leon Ashmore, the Director of Development and Economic Development, Andrew Ashcroft, the Interim Service Manager for Planning, sitting today on my right, Sanjit Sull, the Monetary Officer and Borough Solicitor, Tracy Coop, Democratic Services Officer, and I think, Maisie, are you hiding around the side there? I think you are. Maisie Housden, yes, there. I think that's probably covered everybody as to who's here. Just some housekeeping issues then, if we could, to start with. No fire alarm planned. If it does go, follow us is the best advice. We shall head out through those doors to the assembly point. Although you could go through the double doors and work your way to the car park at the back, but best to follow us, but nothing planned. Mobile phones, always an issue. I've switched mine off, but it's easy to forget. If you could silent them or mute them, it saves that distraction. Those that speak in, both here in the committee and who come to the table to present, if you could speak up loud and clear into the microphones, hopefully we shall all hear you. I am minded it's quite a long agenda. We would normally take all the reports that are started before 5 o'clock, and but if not, then they would have to revert to the next meeting. So there's an urgency really to get our skates on, so to speak, and move through the various reports. Bearing that in mind, if anybody is crossing their legs mid-afternoon and is desperate, I'm quite prepared to do a 5-minute adjournment for the facilities around in the foyer there, but I'll see how we go around 3:30, something like that. Right, the main agenda, item 1, I think I've covered apologies for absence of substitute members in my introduction. Are there any declarations of interest from the members? Councillor Gray.
Carry a non-pecuniary interest in item 3, as I know the architect, so I will excuse myself for that item.
Thank you. Any others? Are there any declarations of the code of conduct or the planning code? All covered. Agenda item 3 then, the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, which was on the 10th of March this year. You've had a copy of those minutes. Are those of you that were here agree that they are a correct representation of the debates? And if so, could I have a proposer and a seconder? Yes. Councillor Mason, are you proposing, or Councillor Bailey? By the way, Councillor Bailey, you were first. Are you proposing? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Mason seconding. Thank you very much. That's agreed then. So we move on to item 4, this afternoon's planning applications. My usual brief screed, if I may, for those of you who are subbing mainly. This is a quasi-judicial meeting, so I just remind people that we need to be professional in our discussions and our debates, and only material planning issues should really be discussed and debated. And not too much emotion on those issues. Try not to repeat the points, if you can, that have already been made, and keep your comments relatively concise and relevant to the issue in hand. We should note, as usual, we've got a report from the Director of Growth and Economic Development, which gives the overview to us of the planning process, just reminds us of how we conduct the business, and indeed the applications that we are considering this afternoon, which takes me swiftly to the first application, if I may, which is, and quite a lot of complications this afternoon, and this one starts off with a little bit of a complication because there are two planning application reference numbers. The first is 21//02987/full, and the second one linked to it is 21/02993/RELDEM. I'll briefly read the intro. This is all about 1A Station Road, Eastleague, Nottinghamshire. The proposal: 1, demolition of existing shed, construction of new detached garage, new access to include new driveway, alterations to the front boundary wall, including partial demolition and new dropped curb. And item 2, the partial demolition of that front boundary wall. So that's the application before us now. I'll hand over to, just bear with me, I am got a lot of issues here. Who's taking this item first? It's got Matt Hilton is taking this item, and I think he will give you a brief introduction and if there are any late representations. Thank you, Mr. Hilton. There's in fact a late representation.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So late representations have been received, which should have been circulated amongst members. Check that's the case. So the application seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing shed, construction of a detached garage, driveway, associated access, including the partial demolition of the front boundary wall. And as covered, because the site is within a conservation area, the partial demolition of the wall also requires an application for relevant demolition. And we're considering both applications together as detailed in the committee report. So the application site relates to a residential property in Eastleague, fronts onto Station Road with a garden which extends, a sidewalk garden which extends to Brookside. We've got a commercial property to the north, barber shop on the corner of Brookside and Station Road. Got grade 2 listed buildings at numbers 1 and 3 Station Road. And then to the north, we've got the grade 1 listed church. And there's just an aerial view. So I'm just going to run through a few photos of the site. So this is the corner of Brookside and Station Road. We've got the commercial property here. And then just a view along Station Road. This is a view into the application site. So currently there is a driveway off Station Road. As you can see, the application property and adjacent neighbour are positioned on the pavement edge. So there's very little visibility for emerging vehicles. And this is just a view back towards the junction of Station Road with Brookside. So within the site, we've got a shed which is to be removed, so midway from the site. The area of hard standing towards the back of the site, currently used for parking. And then this is just a view within the site toward the front boundary and Brookside. And then a view towards the neighbour at number 2A. This is a blank side wall facing the site. just a view into the site with the commercial property directly on the right. And then just another view across the front of the neighbour on Brookside at 2A. You can just see in the corner here, there is a garage to the front of this neighbour, which is pretty much on the highway frontage. And again, this is a view across the front of the application site where it puts Brookside, neighbouring garage, and then a commercial property joining that. It's a view back across the front of the application site towards the junction with Station Road. Proposed access will be formed within this wall here. And then there's a view on the opposite side of Brookside. Just going to a bit more detail on the application. Got an existing site plan here. As you can see, there's quite a large area of hard standing vehicle access to back to the site. Number of trees here shed towards the centre of the site. This is a block plan of the proposal. As you can see, the proposed garage will be positioned midway within the site, approximately 2 metres from the neighbour at 2A. Area of permeable hard standing to the front, vehicle access here. And just want to make it clear to members that the area of hard standing to the rear of the site is to be reduced as part of the application, and there is a condition to that effect that's been put forward to remove the hard standing if it were to be approved. So looking at the garage itself, it comprised a 3-bay timber structure with oak cladding and a slate tile roof, pitched roof with a half hip. In terms of the wall, section of the front wall would need to be removed to form the vehicular access. However, it's proposed that there would be a sort of beveled section to either side of the driveway, which would be rebuilt using the existing brickwork where possible, at a lower height of 4.6 metres, 6 centimetres, to retain visibility from vehicles emerging from that access. So in terms of neighbouring amenity, main considerations impact on number 2A to the south, but like I say, the garage will be positioned 2 metres from the boundary, projects approximately 70 centimetres forward of that neighbour, but there are no windows in the side elevation. Officers are of the view that there would not be impact on the front or rear windows or dormer windows serving 2A, given the modest projection forward of this neighbour. And given the position of the garage to the north of 2A, there wouldn't be a significant direct overshadowing of this neighbour. In terms of heritage considerations, obviously it's within conservation area, and we've got the listed properties that you can see to the top left corner at numbers 1 and 3 Station Road. In terms of views of the proposed garage, the neighbour at 2A to the south has got a garage to the front of the property, as I set out earlier in the photos, which would limit views across to the garage on the approach from the south along Brookside. Commercial property on the corner of Station Road to the north and tree cover would limit long distance views from the approach on the north. So really it's when you're to the front of the site that you'd get a view in. But the garage itself would be set back 11.4 metres from the front boundary. They're fairly sizable setbacks there. And although tree removal is proposed to form this access, we are conditioning, if it were approved, there is a condition that we would look for landscaping, including replacement tree planting. So in terms of the impact on the setting of the listed building, namely numbers 1, 3 Station Road and the listed church to the north, it is officers' views that there would not be harm to the setting of these listed buildings. In terms of the removal of the wall itself, there would be a degree of harm arising to the character and appearance of the conservation area, which is inevitable because you are removing parts of the structure. That said, we have, or the officer has worked with the applicant during the course of the application to try and reduce the amount of wall which is to be demolished and rebuilt. The original plans proposed a much larger sort of chamfered area to the south to create a visibility display. It's been amended to reduce the width of the driveway accordingly to maintain as much of the wall on its existing alignment as possible. So as there would be a degree of harm arising, we have to consider what public benefits may arise to outweigh that harm. So it is the officer's view that there would be public benefit arising from improved highway access. Clearly, the existing access on Station Road has very little visibility, and due to the lack of the buildings set back from the road and proximity to a fairly blind corner. The new access would have a improved visibility, so it's considered it. And also there's manoeuvring space within the sites to clearly allow for exiting and entering in a forward gear. Accordingly, it's considered that these public benefits would act to outweigh the harm arising to the character and appearance of conservation from the removal of the wall. In terms of highway considerations, clearly there's been a fair few comments on this matter. It's understood that WL lines have been recently painted on the junction with Station Road. We've got some photos which appear to show that that's taken place. WL lines run up to the corner of the application site. Essentially, although as it stands, you could park in front of the application site, formation of the access would effectively preclude parking in that area. Not received an objection from the Highway Authority on this matter. Final point I want to touch on in this presentation is the impacts on flood risk. The site is within a high flood risk area. It's going to go back to the block plan, apologies. However, although the area of hard standing is going to be created to the front of the site, the Brookside frontage, it would be permeable paving. As set out before, the area of impermeable concrete hard standing to the rear of the site would be reduced. Therefore, overall, it's considered it would reduce the potential for runoff, and we would seek to condition details of the permeable surfacing to be used, along with details of drainage if it were to be approved. Therefore, accordingly, for the reasons that I've set out, the application is before you, Chairman, with a recommendation to grant conditional permission subject to the change of wording in condition 9 as detailed in the late representations.
Thank you. I was just making the point about the late representation, which my colleagues will discuss at the moment. But while they're thinking about that, I have been advised that this is to the committee members, that there are two applications here, effectively, two separate numbers, and therefore they will be voted on separately. So I have a vote for the demolition of the existing shed and the description I read out under item 1, and I'll have another vote for the partial demolition of the front boundary wall. I just thought I'd bring that clarity to you. What do we feel about the late representation? Do you want to just comment on that? This is a late representation from the neighbour at 2A, which we've received and read, and I just think there are some comments we've made.
So yes, on that point, as I sort of set out in the presentation, we're looking at rewording the condition to make sure it is precise. That condition 9.
I think you've covered the points that were made, haven't you? So I think all the committee are content with what's the representation is and officer's response. Right, it takes us to the speakers now. I have 4 shown. The first being Mr. Warren Brown, the applicant's agent, who I shall invite in a minute, followed by an objector, Mr. C. Robinson. And then I have got 2 others, the parish councillor, Councillor Liz Taylor, and the ward councillor, Councillor Leslie Way. Could I ask if those last 2, Councillors Taylor and Way, are you speaking individually on one item or the other? You're covering both items? Okay. Fine. Right, okay, that's fine. Just wanted to clarify that. So if I could invite the first speaker, Warren Brown, to the table in front of me, please. It's a bit like mastermind, actually. But when you're composed and feel ready, you've got 5 minutes, but nothing happens on the clock until you press the button in front of you and the little light will come on red on the microphone. So take all the time you need to prepare yourself. And then when you press the button, as I say, the light comes on and we give you a warning when you're sort of 30 seconds away from the allocated 5 minutes, if that's acceptable to you. So.
So my name is Warren Brown from Millhouses Design Limited, and we are the agents for this planning application. I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Glenn, and I would like to thank the chair and members for allowing me to speak in support of the proposed application. My parents moved to Eastleague in 1965, and myself and my client have spent the majority of our lives growing up in Eastleague. We understand the village, its road layout, and how and where people are likely to park. Having recently moved away, I also appreciate that in order for villagers to be welcoming to young families, a number of parking spaces are required for each property. We have considered comments from neighbours, councillors and those consulted in the submission of documents, and will address those comments raised as follows. The partial boundary wall removal is required to create a new driveway access. The planning officer states that the wall is not specifically identified as a positive feature within the conservation officer. Other walls are identified as significant in the Eastleague townscape appraisal, but my client's walls are not mentioned. The planning officer also states that there are a number of other examples of access points along this stretch of Brookside, and so would not appear at odds with these. Unlike many of these examples, we will be incorporating both the correct visibility displays and sympathetically rebuilding the wall in reclaimed brickwork with lime mortar. The planning officer states that the alteration to the wall to allow vehicular access does result in wider public benefit and improvement, and it is considered that there are highway safety improvements that weigh favour of the proposal. The current parking arrangement involves reversing onto the main road with no facility for off-street parking. The Highways Authority stated that visibility requirements have been met and the officer is fully supportive of the proposals. The removal of a willow tree has been considered. In January 2021, a notice was issued to fell this tree and approval was granted by the Borough Council's landscape officer. The officer confirms that he did not feel comfortable protecting the tree because of its proximity to the adjacent building at 2 Brookside, and the fact it is already damaging the boundary wall. There's also evidence that its roots are damaging foul shared drainage from number 2 Brookside. Examples of timber frame properties, I think you just saw some photos earlier. The Parish Council, objecting on the grounds that the garage is totally out of keeping with the area, appears to contradict the Eastleague Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, which confirms some examples of timber frame buildings. We have submitted examples to the planner of timber-clad buildings within the conservation area and an almost identical timber-clad triple garage 600 metres away, also on Station Road. There were no reported objections from the Parish Council to this similar application on Station Road. The Rushcliff Residential Design Guide acknowledges the use of dark timber cladding, whilst the planning officer states that the proposed largely timber design would be high quality and would provide a positive contribution to the area. In terms of flood risk, the planning officer states that the proposed elements are considered to result in no greater impact in respect of flooding or surface water drainage impacts than what currently exists. The scheme provides a reduction in impermeable areas from 212 metres squared to 127 metres squared, allowing water to soak away quicker than currently and reducing surface water runoff. We would note that Councillor Thomas lives within 300 metres of the application site, and our cul-de-sac access is only 100 metres away from the proposed driveway. And we would request that she declares an interest and withdraws from voting on this application. As you can imagine, this whole process has caused some distress to my client, but I would like to thank the planning officer who has provided excellent support during this application. Our scheme will bring high quality development to this area of Eastleague and will provide improvements to highway safety. These proposals are fully compliant with planning policy, and I would therefore ask the committee to support the officer's recommendations to approve the application, subject to the proposed planning conditions. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Within the allocated time. Thank you. The point you make about Councillor Thomas and a vote, any of us, if it's in our ward, we don't have a vote, we absent ourselves from the debate. So, point taken. Okay. I've had a quick discussion with my colleagues, and we think in lieu of 4 speakers, we would like to address any questions after each speaker, rather than what we usually do with 3 speakers and sometimes collect them all at the end. So if there were any questions that we picked up at all, I don't think there were any, were there? It was pretty straightforward. Thank you very much. I'll call the next speaker then. Mr. C. Robinson, objector. Same procedures, same format, Mr. Robinson. When you're ready, compose yourself and press the button, the red light comes on and the clock starts ticking. 30 minutes from the end, we'll give you a shout.
Before I start, I did ring asking if the plan, first plan, up on the screen, so we should refer to it.
Let's see why you can't.
That was the answer I got from my house.
Good. Oh, well, we'll try. Is that the one you want?
That's the one I want.
Lovely. Great. Well, when you feel ready, just press the button. Great.
I'm Chris Robinson. I live at 8B Brookside, Eastleague. My house is one of the ones adjacent to Levers Close. There are as well 5 other properties, 4 residential and 1 commercial, between Levers Close and the proposed entry. All of these properties already experience significant highway safety issues and traffic congestion problems. Parked vehicles frequently occupy the spaces available between the existing drives. This forms a run of vehicles parked on the inbound carriageway into the village, which then partially blocks through traffic. Exiting vehicles from the 6 properties needing to turn into the village are often forced blind out into the far carriageway. Vehicles attempting to turn in from the village are frequently blocked. The one photograph you've seen was obviously, or Brookside was obviously taken on a Sunday morning. The creation of a 5th exit entrance onto Brookside will only make these problems more severe, because the number of drives will be increased and the number of on-street parking spaces will be decreased. The proposed entrance is immediately adjacent to a major crossing point for pupils and parents going to and from Brookside School on foot. In addition, an NCT bus stop is located in the area. There is no bay for the bus to pull into, so it stops in the carriageway. All these activities increase the volume and complexity of pedestrian and vehicular movement in a restricted area immediately adjacent to the proposed new entrance and a major busy junction. Brookside is part of a main through route between Nottingham and Loughborough, and as such is used by an NCT double-decker bus service. More locally, it links the 4 new housing developments, over 660 houses in all, on the southern edge of the village with the centre of the village. Brookside is therefore carrying an ever-increasing volume of traffic and unfortunately at an ever-increasing speed. The comments submitted by Highways and summarised in RBC's report make no mention of any of the above factors, presumably because it is considered they are not of any relevance. Highways only reference the location of the proposed exit entrance is that it is close to the junction station road with Brookside, and the only reference to traffic congestion is its response to the initial application design. I quote, "Vehicles will have to wait on the carriageway. This will have safety implications." This is the situation that local residents face now on a regular basis. Will have to do so even more frequently in the future if permission is granted. Highways have been solely concerned with improving the design of the new exit entry. The report states, and I quote, "The Highways Office has considered the proposal and the result of the amendments reducing the width and providing appropriate visibility displays. They have not raised any highway or pedestrian concerns with the development. As a result, it is not considered that a refusal could be sustained on the basis of highway safety." The report in its conclusion goes on even further and states the proposal will provide improvements to highway safety. The benefit is to the residents of 1A only. I've tried to demonstrate that this benefit must be measured against the fact that Brookside is a very important through route that already has significant traffic hazard and highway safety issues that negatively affect local residents and the wider catchment area of southern Eastleague. These issues will only increase in severity if permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. I got the focus of your comments was mainly on transport and the highway, but I don't think there was anything that you want to pick up on there, is there, particularly? Other than probably I could say that we do take notice of what the County Council Highway Authority say on these reports, and we have to take note of their advice. I hear what you say about that, but that is the position we're in, isn't it, frankly? If it went to appeal or any issue goes to appeal, then great weight is put on what the Highway Authority, what their comments are. But we'll carry on then. Takes me to the third speaker, Councillor Liz Taylor of Eastleague Parish Council. Same format, same process. When you feel comfortable, just press the button and 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Liz Taylor and I'm Chair of Planning at Eastleague Parish Council. The Parish Council objected to this application in December 2021 and then again to the revised application in January 2022. The property concerned is in the Eastleague Conservation Area. The applicant wishes to change access to his property from Station Road to Brookside. The current vehicle access onto Station Road has been in use for many years and no independent information has been supplied on the safety of this access. The proposed driveway would be onto the main road into and out of the village centre and is busy at all times and is also on a bus route. Currently, there is a 9.8 metre ancient wall on Brookside and the applicant wishes to demolish 7 metres of this ancient wall to establish a driveway with the addition of visibility displays, which would not only be completely out of keeping with the area, but also have a detrimental visual impact on the area. A number of mature trees would also have to be removed to establish a parking area. The loss of the trees would have a negative impact within the conservation area. The tree removal and the subsequent paving required would also increase the risk of flooding in an area which is already prone to flooding. This stretch of Brookside currently has a parking problem, with cars using the hairdresser and the barber frequently parking on either side of the proposed access, which would make entry to and from the driveway dangerous and with poor visibility. Furthermore, the pavement by the wall is used as a crossing point for the children going to the Brookside school, and the proposed access would further increase the danger to children using this busy road. In addition, a replacement garage is proposed, which would be highly visible from the road, and again is out of keeping with the surrounding area and inappropriate in the conservation area. If this driveway should go ahead, it would be personal intrusion on the residents of number 2A, as it would be immediately adjacent to their bedroom. I would like to draw your attention to the spring issue of the Rushcliff reports, as it says the following: conservation areas are a key part of the character and the history of our towns and villages, and we are keen to ensure they remain part of the fabric of these locations that make Rushcliff such a great place to live. The areas see an additional layer of scrutiny to planning applications, as well as some additional controls to ensure preservation remains a key focus. Please bear these words in mind when making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any responses at all?
I think one point I just want to draw members' attention to is there are other similar timber structures in the vicinity, and I do have some slides which I can show to that effect. I also wanted to touch on neighbour amenity, but I'll just go to those slides first. Got property here at number 25 Main Street, where you can see there's been extensive use of timber cladding. We've also got a more contemporary example of Firman Lodge. So in that sense, it's not, I guess, unique in that way. In terms of the actual garage itself, there are other examples in the vicinity, as I've shown in my photos, such as the neighbouring property. I wanted to really go on to neighbouring amenity and the impact on number 2A. I'm just going to go to the site plan.
Mind dropping your microphone, and then it's a bit louder then.
I see. So I appreciate that the proposed garage would be positioned approximately 2 metres from number 2A. However, it is a blank side wall. As it stands, there is an area of hard standing to the back of the site, and in theory, you could park a vehicle in fairly close proximity to 2A. So if the concern is regarding actual vehicle noise and comings and goings, then there is a potential relationship that exists as it stands. So I just wanted to kind of touch that point really. We've already kind of covered highway issues, and like I said in the presentation, in effect, by forming the drive, you are removing the potential for parking directly outside of the site, and then you've got the adjacent WL lines. So there is a potential argument you are opening up visibility to a degree around that junction, and clearly it's a betterment on the situation on Station Road, where you don't have any pedestrian visibility due to the forward positioning of the two adjacent properties. As part of discussions during the application, the wall has been amended, but the return sections to either side are designed to be 0.6 of a metre high to allow pedestrian visibility when vehicles are emerging from the site. So that has been considered as part of the application, but really that's all I wanted to cover.
Thank you, and thank you. Takes us to our final speaker, Councillor Leslie Way, Ward Councillor for the Borough Council. I think you know the routine, Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. I hope that members of the committee have had the opportunity to visit the site and see for themselves the setting and effect that granting permission of this application will have. The photographs, which I'm not going to speak to because I'll run out of time, will show you the areas around the application site and that it is a very pretty part of the village. You've heard concerns about the problems with traffic and parking, and I agree with some of these comments. A dropped curb here will not solve anything, but merely move the problem further along Main Street, causing safety issues elsewhere. The proposed garage is for 3 vehicles, so it's sensible to assume that there'll be a considerable amount of traffic entering and leaving the site, crossing a well-used pedestrian pathway onto a busy main thoroughfare. If these occur at peak times and at the start and end of the school day, far from helping to alleviate the problem, they will add to them. The safety of pedestrians of all ages, including primary school children, is paramount. There are already a number of access points along this stretch, and this addition will exacerbate an already difficult situation. The applicants state the difficulty of leaving the site using the current access driveway, but they well knew this before buying the property. The area is still considered by many as the heart of the village, the ancient heart of the village. I would draw your attention to paragraphs 18 to 29 of the officer report, where the Conservation Officer details significant buildings, structures and amenities in this area, some of which you'll see on these photographs, and the detrimental effect that the proposal will have on the surroundings. Eastleague may no longer be a chocolate box village, but this is its ancient heart, and it's all the more important to preserve the historical references we still have. It's proposed to remove 4 trees and replace them with trees from the RBC free tree screen. These are supplied as saplings, roughly 30 centimetres in height, so it will take considerable time to grow to the size of the existing trees. And if this application is permitted, the trees should be replaced by more mature, substantial specimens. The negative aspects of the barber shop on 2A Brookside are taken as the reason to grant this application, but these predate the designation of conservation area. The proximity of negative buildings makes it even more imperative that nearby positive aspects are preserved. The application sits within the Eastleague Conservation Area and as such is subject to more stringent rules regarding developments. Conservation areas are defined as areas of special architectural or historic interest, the character or appearance of which is desirable to preserve or enhance. The applicant's planning statement, paragraph 6.2, refers to Rushcliff Borough Council Local Plan Part 1, Core Strategy Policy 10, Designing and Enhancing Local Identity, that all new development should be designed to make a positive contribution to the public realm and sense of place, create an attractive, safe, inclusive and healthy environment, reinforce valued local characteristics, be adaptable to meet evolving demands and the effects of climate change, and reflect the need to reduce the dominance of motor vehicles. This application contravenes each one of these. There have been an increasing number of applications for detrimental changes within the conservation area, and concerns are that this is slowly being eroded. One questions the sense in designating a conservation area if the reasons for it are to be ignored. In no way can this application be considered to be conserving and enhancing the historic environment. It's time for Rushcliff Borough Council to take the enforcement of conservation areas seriously. Once part of our conservation area is lost, it will be gone forever. And I ask you to refuse this application. If I've got time left, can we look through the photographs, please? This is the brook immediately opposite the applicant's site. It's a central part of the village and somewhere where children play and people just walk. This is the view from outside where the driveway entrance will be, showing you the old cottages across the road. This wasn't the best way to take these pictures because there's some roadworks going on there, strengthening one of the bridges over the brook. And thank you. And working on the bus stop to make it more accessible. The other way down the street are these substantial old farmhouses. And so you can see, this is a very well preserved part of the village. Thank you. Can you just move on a couple more, please? This is the memorial garden, which is just, if you stand with your back to this application site, just to the left, opposite St Mary's Church. A very important part of the village.
I think it's time, Councillor. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry.
We have to be fair across the board, don't we, to everyone, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any comments that you want to pick up there, Mr. Hilton?
Thank you, Chairman. So just touching on the points regarding tree removal. Clearly in the report, we would be seeking to condition any replacement tree planting and landscaping. There have been discussions with our design landscape officer regarding the removal of the willow, and earlier in the year, I understand a notice was served for the removal of that willow, and that was accepted. It was decided that it shouldn't be covered by a tree preservation order due to the damage that it is causing to the boundary wall. So there has been some acceptance already of the removal of the trees on site. So although you are opening up views, we would be looking to secure some meaningful landscaping. So in terms of the safety concerns, I notice it is a triple bay garage, but we are looking at an existing property, just moving the access from Station Road. So there isn't a intensification of use as far as I can see on that point.
Thank you. Well, we've had the 4 presentations from our speakers, and I thank them for that and for keeping to the time allocated. It's now the time which we as a committee need to discuss this report, and who's going to start the debate? Councillor Price, thank you.
Yeah, just a question on the trees. Obviously, we've heard that there were 4 mature trees that are going to be removed and replaced, ideally with similarly mature trees. At previous planning committees, I've heard it said that trees are innocent until proven guilty, and I've heard that the willow tree is guilty in that it is causing a problem and its removal has been approved. I was just wondering, do we have any further details about the other 3 mature trees and why they need to be removed entirely and replaced?
Any thoughts on that? Trees, Mr. Hilton?
What I'd say on that point, Councillor Price, is that we have a notice here for the removal of the willow pear and 2 lilacs. At that point, it was determined that they should not be or would not be reasonable to protect them with the tree preservation order, but I'm unable to comment further on this. I guess the reasoning behind that decision. I assume it's taking into account amenity impact. Other than the willow, which is causing damage, I don't have any information on the other trees, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, you've indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask Mr. Hilton if we could have a look at the existing access off Station Road? I believe you said that it was the forward positioning of the properties onto the road were, so that was it, yes. So really, that is the access that they currently have. Oh, it's gone. Could you have that one back again a moment ago? So is there any, it's hard to tell because it's a little bit dark. There's very little, if any, pavement, is there, between the properties and the road itself? A small amount of pavement, but not easy visibility really to see out on Station Road. I think for me, it sums it up a little bit, comparing this with what they're proposing. Thank you for that.
Any comments on that? I mean, I think we can see from the photograph drop curb and the pavement widths. And
effectively, there is no real pedestrian visibility display because you are merging straight onto the very narrow footway. Just a point I don't think I really covered in the presentation is that this existing access would be closed to vehicles. That would become a pedestrian only access if it were to be approved. So we don't have a situation with two vehicular access points.
Yes, valid point there. Is it Councillor Phillips? Yes, Councillor Phillips next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've actually paddled over and had a look at this, and I was quite amazed really that cars were able to sort of reverse into that. It's quite narrow, and clearly you've got to reverse in, you couldn't reverse out. And I would imagine if there's 2 or 3 cars in the back there, you're going to have to bring cars out before you can get the one at the back out, where the new application, you can actually manoeuvre vehicles within the property boundary and make it a lot safer, and there's a clearer view with the lowering of the wall. I just wanted to confirm that one of the conditions, if this application is approved, that it is a forward sort of drive in and drive out, and that would be a condition, because there's no point in, if it was approved, having vehicles reversing out, especially as we've mentioned, the school, lots of kids walking up and down, crossing there. So I think that's important that it is, drive in, drive out. And then the only other point was the mention of the replacement trees, that they're going to be saplings. I think they need to be something a little bit more substantial than that. Otherwise, we're going to take forever for them to mature. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's all about the new proposed entrance, exit. Can you manoeuvre within the curtains of the site to drive out, car first, so to speak, and the trees? So.
Thank you, Chairman. So clearly from the block plan, you can see that we've got the freeway garage and a sizable area of manoeuvring space to the front. I suppose we can't condition what the vehicles do themselves, because that wouldn't be, enforceable to ensure that they do emerge in a forward gear, but we have got that manoeuvring space, which is not the situation at present with the very constrained driveway. And the trees really would just be covered by the landscaping condition, so we would have to consider that at discharge condition stage if we're to get to that stage.
Happy with that? No? Supplementary?
I just thought you could actually make it a condition that vehicles enter in a forward gear and leave in a forward gear. I'm particularly concerned that if there's lots of school kids walking up and down, and let's say this applicant have got visitors and you can't manoeuvre within that space, then they're going to have to reverse that, and that becomes a safety issue.
Yeah, your point about can a condition be put on that you exit in a forward gear? I don't know, so I defer to.
I mean, if I can help here, what you can put on is a condition that requires something to be constructed to proper standards. Plainly, you can't put a condition on to force people to behave in a certain way. And that's what we think we've achieved here. But plainly, it will be impractical to monitor and to enforce how people use that driveway. But I think both we and the County Council are satisfied that it meets their standard, so that cars can go in a forward gear, manoeuvre in the site, and then exit in a forward gear.
Thank you. I think Councillor Gowland, you indicated next.
Just a couple of things. First of all, I'm not clear why people can't drive in and drive out of that side exit at the moment, because it does look like there's an equal amount of turning space at the back, if I'm understanding where the hard standing is, compared to where it will be at the front. That may be misunderstanding. And secondly, presumably we could put a sign up that at least said, please come out forward. And finally, we're talking a lot about road access, but I think the main issue here is this is a conservation area. Far be it for me to comment on the conservation in Eastleague, but you know, the conservation officer did seem to be quite clear about the issues here. And it does seem a pity to damage this wall, and the replacement is clearly very different to what is there now.
3 points, I think, there, wasn't there? The current vehicular access egress from Station Road, why can't they turn around within the site? Something about trees and the broader aspect of conservation area. Yes.
Like I say, really, is the area of hard standing as it stands is more constrained than the proposed situation. Although it's showing that hard standing, I understand that that's not all available for use for vehicles, and you've got a fairly constrained sort of pinch point to the corner of 1A there. So it's I guess more difficult to manoeuvre within that site if you've got more than one car park in that area, I suppose.
Chairman, if I can help on that one, and plainly I think members are getting to the heart of the issue here, and it's how you balance up what appear to be the reasonable expectations of a property owner with effectively safeguarding the character and appearance of the conservation area, which is plainly a national priority. And clearly Rushcliff Borough Council, in its wisdom, has declared this and other conservation areas as conservation areas within which national guidelines would work, and indeed which the government and which your local plan would expect you to work through. And I think here we're getting into the traditional planning balance. And section 16 of the MPPF gives you some particular advice about how you balance these issues, and in particular how you balance the harm that's created to a conservation area by a development proposal of this nature with the potential benefits. And in doing so, it asks you to make a judgment about the nature of the harm that's caused to the conservation area. And I think it's generally common ground here that we're talking about the harm to a wall in the conservation area. And I think that's why everybody has concluded that it's less than substantial harm. We're not talking about the demolition of a Grade 1 listed building that happens to be in the conservation area. But that said, let's not downplay the significance of that harm, because inevitably the conservation area and its character is formed by a series of many things. And part of it is the character and the integrity and the design and the materials of walls. So here, the critical issue is the extent to which you balance up the issues. And paragraph 202 of the MPPF says, where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of the designated heritage asset, here the conservation area, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimal viable use. So I suggest, though, the key issue there is the public benefits. Plainly, there will be private benefits to the occupiers of this house because they would get a more convenient vehicular access and parking arrangements. But you're invited to look at the public benefits. And plainly, I think there's been some discussion about the public benefits of the safety of vehicles exiting and accessing onto Brookside rather than into the cramped access off Station Road. And clearly there's been some discussion about the access on Station Road. The access on Station Road is what it is because those houses were built before the invention of the car, and therefore they don't come with the traditional visibility displays. So that's your classic dilemma. And if members remember the training that we had several months ago, this is the classic issue. It is. Where you are invited to consider all of the material considerations. We've had a good discussion about all those material considerations, and they pull us in different directions. And the judgment that you as a planning committee have to make is what weight you give to those issues. And I've encouraged you to give particular consideration to what national policy says on this issue, because that's the most recent element of policy that postdates your local plan. It came out July of last year. So it's very topical. It's the most significant issue that you need to consider. So it's balancing that harm, less than substantial harm, to the significance of the asset, with the public benefits, not the private benefits. Hopefully that helps, Chairman.
That helps. Well, it certainly helps me immensely, and it's a good point that you make about the national policy being recent last year. I think we agree there is some harm to the conservation area. Is it less than substantial harm, or what level of harm do we feel it is as individuals and as a committee vis-a-vis the public issues? So I think, thank you for that. I think the next speaker indicates Councillor Bailey again. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I notice on the late representation which has come to committee, and it's the neighbour 2A, and I'm looking at the point 6, and I'm thinking that if the planning committee decides that they're voting in favour of this, if they do, his point 6 says he disputes the time of restricted working hours stroke disturbance, and this should be reduced on a Saturday from 9 AM to 1 PM instead of 5 PM to allow for weekend rest. So what I'm asking is, could we have this as a condition that if this is voted for, could we have this as a condition, bearing in mind the neighbour's request at 2A, that the working hours during construction would be 8 AM to 1 PM? Would this be feasible?
You make a good point. I'll let the officers deliberate on that, and I'll come back to them. But I've got another. Somebody else indicated, was it Councillor? Councillor Butler, if you could come in now, and then we'll come back to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we have a photographer? One of your photographs showed the barber's shop or hairdressers. Did it not? Right. That's there now. So just for clarity, if we go back to the plan, where is that in relation to on the plan? Just so I'm sure. So we've seen the barber shop. So if you just point right. So that is still within the conservation area, isn't it? Right. So I mean, I know design is subjective and we all have our views, but personally, I wouldn't have thought the barber shop is a particularly attractive. Yeah, let's have the barber shop up there again. So there we are. And I don't know, it looks like either plastic cladding or wooden cladding on there. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly not historic, I would dare suggest. So it's there and people are living with it. So I just wanted to get that in context as to where we are. So that is within the conservation area, isn't it? Yes.
No, that's fine. It's
right. So I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to any sort of planning, nothing stays the same forever. And we have to move along. And also when people are putting applications in for this sort of application or whatever, especially I would suggest when it's in the conservation area and what is plainly an attractive area, I would think the last thing that an applicant wants to do is do anything to their property and their surroundings, which may well spoil the look of their own property and the surroundings because they want to live there. So whilst I think that any talk of losing part of a historic wall is regrettable, no one likes losing or taking away things that have been there for a very, very long time. Time moves on, and I think a lot of thought has been put into the stepping arrangement that we saw on the plans, on the design plans of where the proposed vehicular entrance is. And the step, I can't think of the technical term, but the way the wall goes down to help the visibility. So I think that plenty a lot of thought's been put in there, which does sort of give me some heart. So those are the two of my points. Oh, yeah, the other point I was just going to make. It's quite unusual, isn't it, on not just on this application, but any application, is we talk about highways and highway safety in particular quite rightly. We have to take advice from the Highways Authority, who at the end of the day are the professionals on this. Very rarely do they, and we often say this, very rarely do they oppose a planning application. We sometimes laugh, don't we, in this committee about Highways Committee don't object. But it's interesting to see in the report they did raise an objection first time round. But plainly, work has gone on, negotiation has gone on between the Highways Authority and the applicants or the designers to try and alleviate those concerns. And now the highways agencies don't have any concern. The Highways Department don't have any concern. So I think a lot of thought's gone into this. And
So, I mean, I think really, I think we've had a lot of discussion as well. Given what we've seen and heard, and also the suggestion of alterations to conditions, as we've just been discussing, like hours of work, and also I like the idea, if we can, of some sort of more mature trees being put in, as opposed to these tiny little saplings. I think I'm minded to move recommendation to approve as per the report.
Well, thank you for that, but I just want to ask the officers to respond to Councillor Bailey first on the hours. Yeah, of the two. So I'll come back to you, but just a very quick response, isn't there, on the working hours, because it's on in the report.
Yeah, indeed, Chairman. You'll notice that it's on page 41 of your pack under note to applicant. So we traditionally handle this matter by way of a note to applicant rather than a planning condition, because it isn't really a land use issue that we can control by planning condition. But you'll see that we have suggested Monday to Friday, 7 to, sorry, yes, I'm looking at the internet pack.
Page 39.
I apologise, yes. Yeah, so it's page 41 on the internet and page 39 on the printed document for those of you who are in old money. Indeed, yes. So effectively what we were suggesting there is Monday to Friday 7 till 7 and Saturday 8 till 5. But plainly, if members are minded that the Saturday becomes 8 in the morning till effectively 1 just after lunchtime, then that would be a perfectly appropriate way forward, should committee think that's the best way forward.
Thank you. Now, I think we're all done on indicating who wants to speak, but I just wanted to clarify that the monitoring officer has reminded me, as I said earlier on, there are 2 applications effectively here. Which one would you move for, Councillor? But are you moving both of them?
Yes, well, I'm happy to move both. Certainly, the demolition aspect of the existing shed. I don't think anyone can argue about that. It doesn't look particularly.
You never know.
Shed, and so yes, I will. I'm happy to formally move both. So the demolition of the existing shed, the construction of the new detached, as it says in the report, and then part 2, and the partial demolition of the front wall. So yes, I'm happy to move the both.
Thank you. So you're moving. Have we a seconder? Councillor Phillips. Thank you. Right, that gets us to the voting for both applications. I'll take the first application to the vote. This is 21/02987/full demolition of existing shed, construction of new detached garage, new access to include new driveway, alterations to front boundary wall, including partial demolition and new drop curb. That is what we're voting on now. So all those in favour of the report's recommendation to approve that, raise your hands. That's 9. Those against? Any abstentions? Doubt it. Thank you. That item 1 in that application is carried and approved. The second vote now is on item 2, application 21/02993/RELDEM, partial demolition of the front boundary wall. Same procedures. All those in favour of the recommendation? Nine. Those against? 1. No abstentions, I take it, by the maths. Thank you. Right, thank you all the speakers and members for the debate. That was useful. I think it's had a good airing and we've come to a conclusion, which means I think we can carry on to the next report without a comfort break, unless anybody's indicating they're desperate. No, I think we'll move to the next one. Time marches on, doesn't it? So, just bear with me. This takes us to the next application, which is 21/03223/full land north of Renston Road, Eastleague. Erection of 47 dwellings with associated access, parking and landscaping. Andrew Ashcroft, you're going to present this one, I take it?
Indeed, Chairman.
Then full ahead.
Thank you very much. Chairman, just in terms of the items on the late list, you'll see that following the request of Councillor Thomas, we are suggesting 2 additional conditions, which appear on page 4 and 5. They would be should you be minded to grant planning permission, conditions 14 and 15, and respectively they are for electric charging points and also for hedgehog highways, both of which sound very sustainable and forward-looking. Chairman, you'll see that the report in front of you is very full and very detailed, and you'll be delighted to know that I'll simply take you through what I think are the salient points, and Mr. Hilton will navigate us through the slides, and hopefully we'll be in harmony as we go through. But the first slide, it just shows you the location of the site, which I think is fairly well known to members, both in terms of its location and also in terms of its fairly long and checkered and interesting planning history. And if I can just take you through the history, because it gives you quite an interesting context to the issues that we will be discussing. So paragraph 5 of the report sets out the original granting of planning permission for the reserve matters for 235 dwellings. Paragraph 9 then takes you into the more recent history, where an additional 47 dwellings were factored on top of the original 235. And then paragraph 10 takes us to effectively the current, sorry, I apologise, were the last planning application factored in an additional 51 dwellings, I apologise. And then paragraph 10 takes us to the current application, which is on the same site as that for which the 51 dwellings were granted, but effectively is now for 47 dwellings. So if we can see the next slide, which shows you the broader layout of the site, which is partially developed, for which you'll see both the emerging site layout and indeed the existing access and the traditional issues that you see associated with the development of a major planning application. Paragraph 14, I won't take you through the details, but effectively it indicates that all the public right-of-ways, the landscaping, the open spaces, etc., are unaffected by this particular scheme. And you'll see here that the case officer is entirely comfortable that effectively the comparison between the current application for 47 dwellings and the previous consented application for 51 are largely similar to the extent that the design, the layout, the access and the appearance are all considered to be acceptable. Effectively, the principal issue here is the scale and the significance of the house types and how they would come forward and how they would relate in effect to the details that you have now. And effectively the key issue here is very much about the scale and significance of the house types that were included in the most recent approval for the additional 51 dwellings, and then the comparison with those that have come forward. So what you see there is the overall nature of the site, and the two areas that are included in the current application are the areas on what would be the right-hand side of your plan. And it's effectively the areas that are currently without consent, but where the applicant is proposing to change the design and the mix of the house types. There's a very interesting, can you go through to the table, please? Thank you. So what we have here is the table, which is effectively the reproduction of the table that's included in your report. And it effectively tries to set out, the top table is the position of the house types, with effectively 1 and 2 being 1 and 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom, as included in the original reserve matters application for 235 dwellings. And that's set out against the principles and the guidance set out in the Eastleague Neighbourhood Plan Policy 3, which is a key issue in terms of how best members would consider this particular planning application. And effectively, policy H3 of the Eastleague Neighbourhood Plan comments that on developments of 10 or more homes, developers will provide a mixture of homes for the market that broadly reflects Rushcliff Borough Council's and Eastleague's most up-to-date assessment of housing needs. And then it sets out the percentages for different types of houses. And for 1 and 2 bedrooms, it would be between 30 and 40%, 3 bedrooms between 40 and 60%, 4 bedrooms between 10 and 20%, and 5 or greater amount of bedrooms between 0 and 5%. And within that context, you'll see and make your own judgment about how the original reserved matters approval for 235 dwelling meets that. And then what you see in the next table down is the then comparison between the reserved matters application for 235, which is in the 3rd column, and then you factor in the mix and balance of the approved houses of the 51 dwellings, which gives you then the indication of the overall combined scheme. And then what you see at the bottom is the difference between the proposed currently 47 dwellings as against the 51, and what the impact would be on the overall combined scheme. And effectively here, again, it's a bit of school maths here, but I think the fundamental issue is that we should be focusing on the overall yield of the overall site rather than the specific yield of either the 51 or the 47, because ultimately you're judging the yield across the whole site. And you'll see in fairly simplistic terms that the difference between the 47 and the 51 is that the emphasis shifts, or the additional emphasis shifts, from 1 and 2 bedrooms to 3 bedroom dwellings. So within that context, you'll see that the report takes you through a whole series of issues, but in particular, it comes to a judgment about the extent to which your officers feel that the application is still in general conformity, both with our local plan, but is in general conformity with the neighbourhood plan. And here I think it's important because plainly the Eastleague neighbourhood plan remains part of the development plan. And therefore it's important that members take full and proper account of that neighbourhood plan. I think the critical factor is potentially in paragraph 128 of your report, which for those of you in Oldham is page 65, for those looking on the internet is page 67. But I think the key issue here is the use of the word broadly in the neighbourhood plan policy. The neighbourhood plan policy has been carefully worked out, but inevitably is not so prescriptive as to insist that levels of development are carried through in that particular way. So I think that's probably the critical issue that members need to balance here and come to a judgment and weigh that within the round against the overall delivery of new houses on that site, and the way in which it would sit within the broader village and the way in which it would contribute more broadly to housing needs. Plainly, what you will do is balance up the potential statistical conflict with the relevant policy in the neighbourhood plan with the view that the applicant has about their ability to sell houses and where the market demand is coming from, and therefore balance that within the round. Chairman, I'll leave it at that point and answer any questions as they might arise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashcroft. I think you put over quite a complex report in a relatively simple way. That said, I think this is going to be an exercise in mental arithmetic. I was never very good at that, but I'll give it my best shot. I rarely get a chance to say an awful lot from being chair one way or another, but I think the points you made are quite valid, that you know, we should focus on perhaps the combined numbers. If we can do those in our head, and we'll come back to the numbers and the neighbourhood plan. Of course, I mean, I've been a champion, still I'm a champion of neighbourhood plans everywhere. And, you know, it's down to words, isn't it, really? And words can mean an awful lot of different things to different people. But probably one of the key words that you've flagged up is broadly. However, I'll stop there and I'll invite our speakers. We have two, I believe. Mr. Harry White, the applicant, is first on. Mr. White, if you'd care to come to the table. I'm sorry, it's this mastermind, the feel about it, but hopefully it's not too intimidating. But oh, right. Well, when you're composed and ready, as I say, just press the button and we'll start the clock. You've got 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
5 minutes. 5 minutes and 30 seconds before the end of it.
Shouldn't need too long. It's not long since I was last here. But through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee in respect to this application. David Wilson Homes are proud to be one of the UK's largest house builders. At the heart of our company is a commitment to sustainable quality family housing. We have a history of successful applications in the council's authority area and have developed a strong working relationship with officers during the evolution of the Skylarks, as this site is now known. The application before you is, in effect, a replan of the previously approved 51 dwelling application. It seeks approval of 47 dwellings, which reduces the combined phase 1 and phase 2 schemes by 4 dwellings overall to 282 dwellings. The principle of development has been established by the previously approved application for 51 dwellings, and this application has no technical objections. The application proposes a net density of 35 dwellings per hectare for the combined phase 1 and 2 schemes, which is in accordance with both national and local planning policy in making the most efficient use of available land and is consistent with edge of settlement type development. Excuse me. In isolation, this application is a lower density than the previously approved 51 dwelling scheme, with the main point of difference, as your officer has correctly pointed out, being the housing mix. The previous application was for the phase 2 alone was 42 dwellings per net hectare as a standalone site, and the current application is 37 dwellings per net hectare as a standalone site. The housing mix is varied and has been informed by discussions with the council's planning and affordable housing officers. However, we are aware of the objections of the parish and ward councillors on the basis that they consider it does not meet the requirements of policy H3. The application proposes a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, and when assessed against policy H3 as a standalone site is more in line with its requirements than the previous 51 dwelling scheme. Similarly, when combined with the phase 1 approved scheme, the overall mix broadly reflects the requirements of the policy. It's important to be mindful of the wording of policy H3 and the requirement of housing mix to broadly reflect the most up-to-date assessment of housing needs. The thresholds have a degree of flexibility, and this is implied by the terminology, and are not intended to be maximum or minimum limitations, a position that is highlighted by the officer in their report. Further, as noted in the report, the evidence to support policy H3 is over 6 years old. No problem. Thank you. They're very generous of you, Chair. The council are aware that the housing market is fluid and subject to change. Therefore, we must assess opportunities to react to this, particularly when permissions have not been implemented. Since the submission of the 51 dwelling application in 2019, feels like a lifetime ago now, the housing market has experienced significant change, responding to homeowners' requirements for more space for their families and to support home working in particular. This is reflected in the level of inquiries we receive for larger family-style housing and the time taken to complete on smaller properties. The application before you proposes a larger mix, but more evenly distributed across property types to provide variety and to respond to recent market changes. As your officer correctly states in their report, the phase 1 scheme is predominantly smaller product, comprising 74% 2 and 3 bedroom properties. And we consider this meets the needs of people looking for more affordable routes into home ownership. Where the previous 51 dwelling scheme proposed predominantly 2 and 3 bedroom properties, we consider this is now an oversupply of these types of properties in the area. The proposals do not depart entirely from smaller product and continue to deliver predominantly 3 bedroom properties and a significant proportion of 2 bedroom properties, with 4 and 5 bedroom properties comprising the smallest proportion of the mix. Therefore, we agree with your officer's assessment that the mix does broadly reflect the requirements of policy H3 and is appropriate. With respect to other considerations, the application does not affect the provision of open space, the road layout, or the biodiversity credentials of the site. A Section 106 agreement has been prepared in draft and circulated to the council's solicitors and makes provision for off-site and or on-site open space enhancement, allotment provision, and primary school infrastructure, as the previous scheme did. In summary, the proposals are considered to represent attractive, inclusive, and well thought out sustainable development that is in accordance with the principles of national and local planning policy and complementary to the local character. The proposed housing mix is in accordance with the council's requirements and is considered highly inclusive, providing good opportunities for home ownership and a varied housing choice suitable for its location. We therefore respectfully request that members give favourable consideration to this application in accordance with the recommendation of its officers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any questions there. It's a statement of fact, really. So thank you. Right. Yes. Well, thank you for your comments, and invite the next speaker, which is Councillor Caris Thomas, Ward Councillor, one of the Ward Councillors. And I'm sure, Caris, you know the procedure by now. When you're ready, and the clock will start ticking.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Should this application be approved, please add the drafted conditions for hedgerock highways and electric vehicle charging points. This application should be refused on the following grounds. Firstly, the housing mix is not compliant with Policy H3 of the Eastleague Neighbourhood Plan. Secondly, the amenity of residents, particularly in plots 128 to 132 and 255 to 272, would be severely impacted by parking and traffic congestion around the new school. Local Plan Part 2, Policy 1, Part 8 would be contravened. The officer report assesses this application in terms of the entire site. This is misleading. This is not an application to replan the whole site. It's not a variation of a previous application. It's a new application for 47 additional houses to be built on green space within an approved site. Last April, this committee approved an application to build 51 homes on the same areas of green space. You may recall that Eastleague Parish Council and Councillor Way opposed this strongly because Eastleague does not have the infrastructure to support more new houses because of the loss of green space and because of traffic concerns. I agreed with all those comments, but I was swayed against objecting myself because of the number of smaller homes to be provided for the open market. The need for these is continually expressed by our residents. The latest application would replace these smaller homes with larger ones. 14 two-bedroom market homes, including 4 maisonettes, would be lost, plus 1 affordable home. 2 of the maisonettes would have been ground floor. Our planning policy team commented, compared with the approved proposal for 51, there has been a reduction in the proportion of 1 and 2 bedroom open market homes to 16%. This is below the 30% stipulated within the neighbourhood plan. Adequate justification for this divergence from the neighbourhood plan's open market housing mix requirements should be provided. So let's look at the justification provided. In the documents on the planning portal, I can find nothing apart from a comment about land value in the cover letter. This change is about profit, not housing need. The developer's justification appears first in paragraphs 119 and 118 of the officer report and relies on a single market snapshot, plus some comments about inquiries and sales. A 3-bedroom house took 3 months to sell. The new plan adds 3 more 3-bedroom houses. But this is irrelevant anyway. To include policy 3 in the neighbourhood plan, Rushcliff's evidence of household size and housing need was used, an additional local analysis undertaken. This is the accepted method to define the required housing mix and the method that should have been used to justify departure from it. Paragraphs 119 to 128 of the officer report all assess the mix for the overall site, with more quotes from the applicant from a document or correspondence that has not been made available for public scrutiny. The mix for the whole site is not relevant. You must look at the application before you. This is an application in its own right, and it should therefore conform to policy H3 in its own right, but it may or may not broadly conform with respect to the combined site is neither here nor there. I repeat, 14 two-bedroom homes, including 4 maisonettes, would be lost, plus 1 affordable home. It's time for Rushcliff to start paying attention to its neighbourhood plans. I turn now to the other suggested reason for refusal. This application is a new one, not an application to vary the previous application for 51 houses. The previous application is a material consideration and represents a fallback position. But since that application was approved, things have changed.
30 seconds.
The outline planning permission for the new school adjacent to this area has been approved and it is now at the reserved matters stage. This is a material consideration and places this application in a very different context because of the issue of traffic congestion around the school. Immediately next to the school, there are 2 access roads into these 2 areas of new housing. The lives of these residents will be made miserable at school drop-off and pick-up times. Outline approval by the county's planning committee was only after a long debate on this very issue in the context of 51 extra homes.
Pretty well there. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was an awful lot of information there, Councillor Thomas. I'll just flag up 2 from my own perspective. You said, is this an application or is it an application in its own right? I just want some clarification on item 9 of the report, which implies to me that it's part of a bigger one. And you made the point about the Eastleague neighbourhood plan. So those are the 2 things I took away from it, but there may be more. But for my own knowledge, I'd like to know, are we looking at it as a separate application, has no bearing with the wider site? It's paragraph 9 that I'd like clarification on.
Chairman, yes, just as a matter of fact, this is a freestanding full planning application. So at the start of the report, 2103223 full. So it is a full planning application, and plainly members are entitled to take whatever decision or judgment they want on it. Right. Plainly, I think as the ward member has indicated, and quite rightly so too, you're entitled to come to whatever judgment you want on this. Plainly, if you weren't minded to grant planning permission, then the fallback position would be the 51 dwellings. So that's why effectively the focus is on the difference between the fallback position and effectively the current application which the applicant has put forward. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, I'm happy to comment in whatever level of detail is necessary. I think the important thing is for me, if necessary, to restate that the policy is not prescriptive. It does use the word broadly. And actually, the language is even more broad than that, to the extent that the policy actually says that developments of 10 or more homes, developers will provide a mixture of homes for the market that broadly reflects, and then reflects the most up-to-date assessments of housing need. So there is an anticipation that that may change. And also, I think as the applicant did mention, but as the footnote to the policy says, that policy was formulated on a detailed housing market assessment that was undertaken as part of the production of the neighbourhood plan, and that is dated December 2014. So it's relatively recent, but not completely up to date. The other factor that members may wish to balance in the round is that paragraph 2.3.11 of the neighbourhood plan comments, and quite properly so too, that it's intended that the housing mix in particular is an item that will be considered every 4 to 5 years when the neighbourhood plan is reviewed to ensure that the mix continues to be in line with needs and demands. So there was an anticipation at that time that, notwithstanding the plan period of the neighbourhood plan, that there was going to be a review, and there was an acknowledgement or a recognition that housing circumstances may change. Chairman, one final comment. Plainly, this is not the place to go into a detailed debate on viability, but national planning policy, the national planning policy framework and planning practice guidance is quite specific that planning policies and planning decisions need to take account of commercial viability. Developers will not build unless there is viability, and inevitably what the developers here are coming to their own judgments, and plainly people are entitled to take their own view about those commercial judgments, but the developers are taking the view that for viability reasons, it might be more appropriate for them to have a sharper focus on 3-bedroom houses rather than 1 and 2, which is plainly reflected in the table that we've left on the chart. So again, this is classically that area where members need to balance up these issues. Plainly, you need to give appropriate weight to the neighbourhood plan, but you need to give appropriate weight to it given the age of the neighbourhood plan and given the age of the information upon which it relied. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think if we may, we'll leave the chart on the screen because it may be something we want to come back to and look at, I'm sure. Right, who wants to start the debate? Don't all hide back. Councillor Mason, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, it was quite complicated, but I remember it looking at it previously a few times. I would like to just get straight about the neighbourhood plan. It was never reviewed then after 2014. Did you say?
To my knowledge, there's no made version there. A review may have started, but
right.
It hasn't progressed.
But it hasn't progressed. So the numbers that were on there that were put forward, I do recognise, 2014, do change, and as I understand it, then I put down that there were more 3-bedroomed houses. Is that right?
There are more 3-bedroom houses proposed in the application for 47 than there were in the application for 51, which is the fallback.
Yes, it's just that, there were all these figures flying around. Right, because as I understand it, and when I talk to people, family homes are fairly important too, as well as the 1 and the 2-bedroomed. So I was quite pleased about that. So on the whole, and when I listened to the numbers and the figures and the plans and what we've had a look at before, I am of the opinion that I think this is really, I would like to at some stage in a bit, when I've listened a bit more, to propose a recommendation to approve, but I'll just have a
we'll bear you in mind, but we need a bit more of a debate, I think. Thank you. Councillor Price.
Could I just clarify what's already been approved is the development for 51 houses, so that would be the fallback position if we were not to approve this, and so in that 51, because maths is not my my strong point either, is the middle bit. So that's the one that's approved with 48% achieving 48% of the requirement for approved affordable homes, and what's been proposed has a 15.8%, and I think ultimately that's making me quite uncomfortable. That big drop between having a quite substantial proportion of affordable homes and changing that, swapping that out for a really quite significant reduction.
Okay, thank you. Are you looking for a response there, or just a statement, really? Statement. Yeah, no, that's right. No, you have absolutely right. Councillor Gowland.
Sorry, wrong button. Apologise first of all about my phone. I was trying to open the calculator. Okay. I just wanted to say the reason I was opening my calculator is to work out that what we were then told is 14 is not what I'd call broadly in line with. I think the numbers when the plan says broadly in line with, it means rounding errors of 1 or 2 and not these large swings. And I notice it's not only the number of 3-bedroom houses that's outside the range, it's also the number of 4-bedroom houses that's outside number of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom houses. It's also the number of 4-bedroom houses has crept up to be certainly higher than it was. It's actually just inside the range. So I'm not in favour of this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, I believe you indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this site has had a long
history. I mean, I thought we all remember it for all sorts of reasons. I mean, back whenever it first appeared, we turned the whole thing down and it went through on appeal, didn't it? So, but we are where we are now, and I think in these sort of situations, you, as well as looking at planning guidance and law and all the rest of it, you've got to be pragmatic. And Eastleague has seen a tremendous amount of development, and it still is. I mean, it's this site, the one direct next to it. I mean, they've had hundreds and hundreds of new homes, and it's often pained us that it's happened. But we're, to coin a phrase, we are where we are, and isn't it ironic slightly that here we are, having had lots of discussions about this site in the past and the other Eastleague sites about the whys and the pluses and minuses of new housing. Usually people say we don't want it, or usually they're saying we're building too many. But here we've got an application now for building a few fewer than is already in place. So, which is a really unusual situation for us. I think it is slightly different. But that is now. I hear what colleagues are saying about the concern about the loss of the reduction in the number of 1 and 2 bedroom properties and affordable properties. But no, considering that there are lots of other applications and housing taking part, is it allowed or a material thing to bear in mind the impact of other housing that's going on at the moment to possibly allay people's fears on that? I just need to be just a general query in that regard. And also, I picked up very much a point that the officer made, and it's in the report as well, that one has to think about the viability of development, and that I read what I read in the reports, but also what you hear in the news about markets and all the rest of it is, I think, very relevant. Thank you. Do you want to respond at all, Mr. Maskell?
Only one point, and that's on the specific question about whether you consider this site by itself or within the round against other schemes. And plainly, it's the guiding principle that you treat each application on its merit, and therefore on a site of this scale, you would reasonably expect it to come forward with a housing mix that was meeting the policies in our local plan and also those in the Eastleague neighbourhood plan. So plainly, it would be wrong to attempt to offset a housing mix on site A by a development on site B. I think some members might be alluding to the fact that we're attempting to do that here by looking at the broader site, but inevitably, irrespective of what you might think of the 51 or the 47, they are seen to be part of the broader development and will ultimately form part of the broader development, and therefore it appears not unreasonable to look at it within the round. But plainly, members are only making a judgment, as we've rightly concluded, on the 47, which I accept mathematically skews the figures away from those figures that you had on the 47 and skew it away from that balance within the Eastleague neighbourhood plan. But as you yourself said, it's about looking at this within the round and looking at this within what will be a consistent and a holistic site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think Councillor Phillips, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. So if this application is approved for the 47 dwellings, I'm keen to see that the Hedgehog Highway is implemented. I'm not so certain about the electric charging points though, because you're just adding extra costs, and we're already in a situation where inflation and interest rates are going up, and you're going to put more costs into those houses for people. It should be an option when you're buying off plan, an option to have the electric power point put in and not compulsory. Thank you.
Very radical views there. Very radical. Councillor Gray.
Looking at this, we focus very heavily on the word broadly, and I suppose that's why we're having this discussion. So the 51 house application broadly provided 50% of 1 and 2 bedroom houses. In the 47, we've moved that broadly to around a sixth. That takes, so in the original one, we were looking at around a third, and then with this new proposal, we're looking at broadly a quarter. So the difference between a third and a quarter, you're talking as a percentage, 17.8%. So you're looking at broadly a fifth. Where else can you under-deliver by a fifth, by 20%, and still say you are conforming? If someone tried to, I know we don't talk about council tax in that broadly we accept what people pay, we like people to pay the full amount. But if someone said I'd broadly paid you and they were missing 400 quid, we'd be rightly miffed. So I think that the interpretation of broadly here, I think as it's presented in those tables, you look at those things and think, well, that's 5% different, but actually what you're looking at the delivery is nearly 20% off. So I think broadly this doesn't conform to our mix and to the neighbourhood plan. So that's kind of I think a lot of people have said mathematically they shy away from these things. I think if anything I go the other way. So yeah, I think broadly we're nowhere near.
Thank you. Don't have anybody else indicated to speak? Oh, I have now. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very aware that obviously it's got to be economically viable for the developer, and he has wanted to do more 3-bedroom houses. But I actually think the way we use our houses has changed so much since COVID that so many people are either working from home or they're doing hybrid working, a little bit like the offices here, where they will work here some days of the week, but the rest of the week at home. So my thoughts are, yes, they will be 3-bedroom houses, but I think that there will be a good proportion of them. One of those bedrooms will actually not be a bedroom, but be used as a home office. And I think this is the way in future that we probably will be working. So, and I don't think this is a short-term thing. I think this is the way we'll work in the future. So I think 3-bedroom houses that have the provision for an office is something we should be looking at. And it makes it much better for anybody living there. It gives them more opportunity to use the house in the way they see fit. So those are my thoughts, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm minded the clock is marching on. Are we coming to the end of the debate? We had at Councillor Mason indicated a proposal. Have we a seconder at all? Councillor Butler, I think, picked you for the post. So Councillor Mason is proposing the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Butler. I think it's time to come to go to the vote. Usual.
With the additions that have been voted by Councillor Thomas, was it?
Oh, the hedgehog runs and the Councillor Phillips, the electric charging points.
There was two, there was on the charging points. Thank you.
Point taken.
Actually, I mean, without wishing to take too much time on this, did I not read and hear somewhere that there is legislation coming in anyway about electric car points on
you probably did.
On new properties anyway? So there probably isn't a choice. I'm sure I read that or heard that somewhere. So yeah.
Okay. Valid points. Right, we'll take the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Six. Those against? 4. I think that's everybody, isn't it? Yes. Thank you. The vote supports the recommendation to approve, and we'll move on to the next item. Well, does anybody want a break at all? We've got 45 minutes. We'd like a break. I'll have a 5-minute break then. If we could all be back by 4:25, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we all begin to get back to our seats? It's 4:25 by my reckoning. Here they come. Thank you. It'd be nice if we could complete all the agenda this afternoon. As I say, we can go to 5:30 and if necessary, extend for 30 minutes to 6 o'clock. So it's coming up to 4:30. We have potentially an hour and a half to complete the next, 3 items. So there's the challenge for us. And without more ado, I think we're all present, are we? Yes. Right, this takes us to agenda item 3, which is reference 22/00011/full agricultural barn on land north of Beck Lane, Willoughby on the Wolds. A proposed residential use of an existing agricultural building to create one dwelling, including creation of residential curtilage and parking. We have no late representation, so I'm going to go straight in and ask Mr. Hilton to do the presentation. If you could, Mr. Hilton, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application seeks planning permission for the conversion of a barn to residential property, along with and the formation of associated residential curtilage and parking. So the application site relates to a portal-framed agricultural building located in open countryside to the south of Willoughby on the Wolds. In the picture here, you can just see Willoughby to the north. I'm just going to go straight into the photos of the site. So this is the view into the site of the existing building. Portal-frame building clad in corrugated metal with fibre cement roof. Area of rough hard standing to the front. It's the view into the site from back lane entrance. You've got a field gate. Properties in the distance at the edge of Willoughby. It's another view of the application site. So as you can see, there is a reasonable degree of hedgerow screening immediately to the front. And then just another view standing back, taken from back lane, showing the existing access, which would need to be upgraded as part of the application. And then this is a view looking east along back lane towards the A46 direction. It's a view looking towards the rear of the barn and looking sort of west, and then again a view looking west along back lane towards the crossroads with Westthorpe and Willoughby. So existing site plan here and existing elevation plans. So as you can see from these plans, internally there is a blockwork wall which has been formed. It runs up to broadly sort of eaves height of the building and a concrete slab floor, and externally there's sort of corrugated metal cladding to the elevations, largely gapped up, some high level openings that you can see. So the proposed works would comprise the recladding of the elevations in timber, in vertical timber. The main metal structure, the framework, would be retained, as would the roof covering. So along with the recladding of the building, there would also be the formation of a number of windows in elevations. Some of the windows in either end of the building would use existing openings, but there would be some new openings formed as well. So we just want to emphasise that we no extension of the existing building beyond its footprint. So the existing barn is understood to no longer serve its agricultural purpose. It's understood that the land associated with it, the agricultural land, has been sold, and therefore it is effectively now a redundant building. The site's in the open countryside, outside the green belt, and therefore we have to consider it against policy 22 of the local plan part 2, which covers development in the open countryside. Part 2 of this policy sets out appropriate forms of development, and this includes the reuse and adaptation of buildings. And therefore, the first consideration really is the building capable of adaptation without significant rebuilding or alteration? I would say a blockwork wall was formed internally within the building. Previously, we considered the building wasn't structurally capable of conversion, but then a blockwork wall was formed and the timber cladding would be attached to this, and it does provide structural integrity to the building. These internal works, blockwork wall and slab floor, don't constitute development by definition of section 55 of the Town and Country Planning Act, so therefore did not actually require planning permission to be carried out. Like I say, we now consider it was the officer's view that the building is capable of conversion to a dwelling without the need for rebuilding. Like I say, the building will be clad in timber in place of the current corrugated sheet metal, which would, in the officer's views, improve the overall appearance of the building. And the timber cladding, the vertical timber, is similar in appearance to the sort of Yorkshire board cladding that you'll often see on agricultural barns. And accordingly, it is the view of the officers that it would be essentially retaining its agricultural appearance by and large, other than the addition of various openings in the building. In terms of means of enclosure externally, of the garden space, for example, it's understood it's likely to be a post and rail fence or similar, rather than a standard sort of closed board fence. But this is something which would be secured by way of condition if the application were to be approved. So accordingly, it's the view of officers that the proposal would not harm the landscape character and that it would therefore comply with policy 22 of local plan part 2. So just going back to the site photos, as you can see here, there is a good degree of screening along the front boundary of the site. So essentially you get views when you're approaching along back lane, but they are limited to really sort of glimpses of either end of the building, and you don't get a significant sort of view of that sort of front-facing elevation. That said, if I go back to the elevation plans, there are fairly minimal openings in that road-facing elevation. The openings are largely in the rear elevation facing the field and to either end of the building. Like I said, the works would require the upgrade of the existing field access, which would be secured by field gate access, and this would be secured by way of a condition if planning permission were granted. Therefore, for the reasons set out in this presentation, the application is before you with a recommendation to grant conditional planning permission.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers on my list for this application. The first one, if you'd like to come to the table, Mr. Nick Basley, the applicant's agent. Thank you. You have 5 minutes when you press the microphone and the red light comes on, and we give you a warning when you've got 30 seconds left.
Mr. Barclay, I'm another chap speaking within these 5 minutes.
Would you be George Mann then? My apologies. No, wasn't on there.
Right, well, my name's George Mann. I live in Willoughby, close to the shed. I've no specific association with this application other than it's a shed I've been familiar with since its construction 25 years ago. And I currently rent land from the applicant, the 4 acres associated. Now, when the shed was originally built, I was a good friend of the old chap who built it, and I used to help him with his lambing activities and things in there. And at the time, I thought this was a very ugly building. I still think, as you've seen from the pictures, it is not pretty. And I think it currently really detracts from the sort of visual aspect of the approach to the village. And so I'm surprised that there was such objection to basically the sympathetic conversion of an ugly building into quite an attractive family home, which is what prompted me to sort of make some comments on the application. Also, the other point I would make is I think this, as you know, is not an application to build a new house. It's simply an application to convert an existing building into a house. And so I also think the sort of fears that this will prompt the building of the Willoughby on the Wold housing estate, basically, it seems to be undermines the sort of confidence in the whole planning process. This is not the start of a massive development. This is simply making an ugly building look an awful lot more attractive. And at that point, I think you do get to hear from Mr. Baisley.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Baisley. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and I'm the agent for this planning application. This is an application for the residential conversion of an existing building, not a new dwelling. We accept the site lies outside of the village boundary and within the open countryside. However, the residential conversion of existing buildings represent one of the few categories of development that are allowed in such a location via policy 22 of your development plan and paragraph 80 of the NPPF. The submitted structural report confirms the building is suitable for conversion and complies with policy 22, and this has already been accepted by your professional officers. The conversion will secure the reuse of a now redundant agricultural building and bring about an improvement in its appearance as a consequence of the conversion works. The proposed residential curtilage has been deliberately limited to minimise impact on the surrounding countryside, and this can be effectively controlled by planning condition. Councillor Edivine infers that the building is not eligible for conversion owing to internal works having previously been carried out to the building, but with respect, this is simply wrong. First, such works in themselves did not require planning consent as they did not constitute development. The existing building is an authorised building. There are no suggestions to the contrary and any enforcement proceedings pending. Second, the timing of such works were only relevant to the previous Class Q proposal rather than this current planning application. Indeed, when dismissing the Class Q appeal, the inspector directed the appellants to the need to secure the residential conversion by other means, i.e. via this conventional planning application now before you. The council has approved many such residential conversions in the open countryside in accordance with policy 22 of the and the NPPF. There's nothing particularly special or unique about this application that would justify the council taking a different view in this instance. There are no highway objections or indeed any other objections from a technical standpoint. The views of the parish, Councillor Edivine and a few local residents are noted, but these relate to the principle of a new dwelling beyond the settlement limits and any precedent this would cause. But these fail to acknowledge that as a conversion of an existing building, the principle of development in the open countryside is acceptable and will clearly not give rise to an undesirable precedent for development to occur beyond the village limits, where there is not already a building suitable for conversion. So for all these reasons, it's hoped you're able to support the application this afternoon in accordance with the recommendations set out in the committee report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, both of you. Are there any issues you'd like to respond to at the moment? No. I'll start the debate if I'm... Oh, Councillor Edivine, my apologies, yes. Councillor Edivine, you have the usual 5 minutes. Thank you. I believe it is.
Thank you, committee. I was going to start with a short history of this barn, but you've already had it. It was constructed about 25 years ago when the nearby Brook Farm Court was built.
and its purpose was to provide a lambing shed for the semi-retired farmer whose barns ironically had all been sold off to create the development of Brook Farm Court. The surrounding area, apart from a small amount of hard standing on one side, remained as pasture land. It's been taken out of agricultural use by the applicant, who seems to have identified it as an opportunity for conversion to a residential building. And I would ask the committee to consider if this truly is a redundant building, or has it been rendered thus deliberately? This is now the applicant's fourth bite at the cherry, having had previous applications rejected even after appeal. It is said that the land associated with it has been sold off, but I believe the applicant actually owns the whole of the larger area of 4 acres. I do accept that the internal work to prepare this building for possible residential use didn't require planning permission, but that doesn't alter the fact that in its current form, construction of this building was only completed in 2019. Said construction being carried out with great subterfuge. I believe the MPPF says that conversion of agricultural buildings cannot be done within 10 years of construction. And I'd like to see the committee debate thoroughly when this construction was deemed complete. Policy 22 does indeed allow for conversion of suitable buildings as set out in Part 2B of the policy. But is this truly an appropriate use for a building that could still serve as an agricultural building? Policy 22 Part 3A states, among other things, that the development will be permitted where the appearance and character of the landscape, including features such as habitats, amongst others, are conserved and enhanced. And I'd urge members of the committee to consider how this can be achieved with the creation of a residential garden in the open, no matter how small. And this, bearing in mind, is currently pasture land. This must have a significant impact on the habitat surrounding the barn. And we as a council recognise that formalising a landscape does change the habitat. And this is witnessed, for example, in our increasing no-mow policy of our verges. And I believe policy 22.3a on its own should be grounds for rejecting this application. Part 3C of policy 22 says that developments should not be permitted if they will create or extend ribbon development. The nearest housing is only 90 metres away, and the committee should consider how long, if this structure becomes residential, will it be before extensions to the Brook Farm Court might be put forward to bridge the gap. It really is not an isolated development. It sits very close to the village. Finally, whilst highways have no objections on road safety grounds, no consideration has been given to pedestrian access along this busy rat run used as a shortcut from the A6006 to the A46. If the occupants have children, whilst only 200 metres as the crow flies from the village school, access is in reality more like a kilometre away. With the first 200 metres of this rat run, there is no suitable pedestrian access. And I believe this is contrary to the MPPF Part 9, promoting sustainable transport. And development should be focused on locations which are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel and offer a genuine choice of transport modes. I certainly wouldn't want my children walking along back
30
lane
seconds
to the school, which means only journeys to school by car would be feasible. It's true that the inspector, in rejecting the last appeal, suggested that he should be brought forward as a full planning application, but I don't think he actually said that you have to grant permission. And finally, I'd say if the committee are mindful to allow this application, if I was a farmer in Rushcliff, I'd be considering building a barn in every field that I possessed, because they would be guaranteed conversion in due course.
Time, perfectly timed. Thank you very much. Quite a lot of issues there. Is now the time to answer some of them, or shall we? Like Fu?
Thank you. So, in terms of reference to ribbon development, first of all, and whether it's isolated, clearly you can see from the photo on the presentation that there are properties visible in the distance, but there is a sizable gap between the application site and those properties. And on Back Lane itself, there is again a considerable distance from the frontage properties, which are located close to the junction with West Fork. So I think in my mind does read as being very much on its own and does not appear as a sort of a site which would lead to an extension of an existing ribbon of built form, given the separation from neighbouring properties. In terms of the discussion, the development when the building was completed and the internal works, clearly as covered before, internal works do not constitute development by definition of the Town and Country Planning Act. And the building has been in situ for a considerable amount of time prior to the installation of the blockwork wall and slab floor. So I think it's difficult to say that it is a continuation of the construction of the original building. Okay.
Thank you. I'll always come back to these issues. Before I open the debate, I've got a couple of questions myself. It says in paragraph 1, the barn comprises a portal frame building clad in corrugated metal with a fibre cement sheet roof. And then in paragraph 5, the roof covering is to be retained. If at some point in the future that roof was replaced, does that need any planning permission at all? Or can it just be done? I don't know. I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, but
it's fair to say we haven't removed permitted development rights, or there isn't a restriction such for the change of the roof covering. Therefore, in a similar way to if you were re-roofing your own property, if yes, in theory, you could use a similar material to replace the existing fibre sheet cladding.
Yeah. So really, the answer is yeah. At some point, it could be the roof could be replaced. Could you put the first slide up for me, which showed the existing with the blockwork internal wall? Because I can't remember if it was continuous or whether it had gaps in it. So I read the plan on the right as a continuous blockwork wall with a couple of doors in it, one at the top and one at the bottom. But when we looked at the proposed plans, that showed any number of window apertures and door apertures through that blockwork wall. So am I correct in thinking that significant parts of that blockwork wall would have to be modified, taken away or whatever, wouldn't they, to if we go ahead with the proposed new layout, so to speak?
Yes, that's correct. Sections of the blockwork wall, particularly on the field facing elevation, on the left-hand side there, would need to be removed to make those openings. Yes,
thank you, because there are quite large windows being proposed. And finally, I come back to Councillor Eddiebeans. I need clarification on this 10-year rule. I mean, it's in paragraph 9, talks about this allegation, I choose my words carefully, that buildings cannot be considered for conversion within 10 years of construction. This building was substantially modified in 2019. As such, no provision could be granted prior to 2029. Have we a view on that? A bit more clarification.
So in my mind, that appears to be a reference to what can be done under Class Q prior approval, rather than what we focus on here, which is a full planning application. I don't think the time limit is of relevance to this particular application. Clearly, a prior approval has a fixed date where a building needs to be in agricultural use on the 20th of March 2013, or for a period of 10 years. And we're not looking at that same criteria for this particular application. We are purely judging it against whether it conforms with policy 22, which in itself doesn't set out any such timeframes.
Thank you. Right, I'll open the debate. I've got a couple of speakers indicated at the moment. First one is Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some other things to talk about, but first of all, I would like some clarification as to how much of this building is to be reused in the conversion. I note from the inspector's report that the internal walls that had been constructed were deemed to be part of the conversion of the building, which had commenced, which was what the officer said. So I'm not counting those constructions, but of the rest of the construction of the barn, how much of it will be used in constructing the new house? Thank you.
If you could clarify that, it's a difficult question.
Essentially, by its nature, a portal frame barn is a metal framework structure, and that metal framework along the roof covering, as we said, would be retained. I think in the previous applications prior to the construction of block work, we felt it wasn't capable of conversion, but with the blockwork wall, that helps to tie the structures together, and the timber cladding would be directly attached to that, to what I understand. So it would facilitate the conversion. So yeah, that's it. It is the metal framework and the roof.
Thank you.
The building itself, before these walls, was not capable of being converted into a. Was that the structural report from the first one? But with the walls, it would be capable. But the inspector determined that the walls were part of the conversion, and the conversion work had started. So I don't see how they can be taken into account while determining whether or not the building is capable of conversion as it stands. Thank you.
The Mason.
Thank you. I haven't heard anybody mention the word insulation. And I wondered what insulation would have to be.
I think we could wander in the worlds of building regulations here, aren't we? We're looking at planning as a principle, not. I mean, it would have to get planning
but they're
building.
talking about, you know, making it a standalone building.
They are.
And they are talking about that there's metal walls and there's wood. That doesn't seem like a permanent house to me, but I'm willing to listen. That outline planning permission doesn't have to even mention what something is made of, that they could just put wooden planks up.
I think we're looking at the visual appearance, aren't we? And it's stating timber boarding, then whatever, and then the blockwork wall that's there. But I mean, to get through building regulations, it would have to comply.
I really,
and I don't think possibly that's.
But we're being asked to say, is that going to be, you know, suitable in that area? That's all.
I differ.
When is a house a house? When is a building a building?
Sorry for that, Chairman. I was just waiting for my microphone to turn itself back on. I think members are asking the right questions here, because we're getting to the heart of what policy 22 says. And clearly it's an issue of common ground that one of the exceptions of allowing development in the countryside, it's in part 2 of policy 22. One of the exceptions is that the reuse and adaptation of buildings for appropriate uses, including housing. And effectively that's the applicant's case, that this is what it is. And I think what members are asking the question, is this effectively the reuse and the adaptation of a building, or is it going beyond that? Is it effectively the construction of a new building other than the timber frame? And inevitably that's that's part of the planning history which members have previously been exposed to. What members also need to consider is that the exceptions in the second part of the policy are then also underpinned by information in the third part of the policy, which says if you meet any of the exceptions in the second part of the policy, you've also got to comply with various criteria in the third part of the policy. Most of them don't apply to this type of development, but the first one is the important one, that the appearance and the character of the landscape, including its historic character and features such as wildlife, habitats or views, settlement pattern, river, watercourses, etc., is conserved and enhanced. So it's effectively that two-part test. The first is whether this is an application for the reuse and the adaptation of the building. And then secondly, if you conclude that that is the case, the appearance and the character of the landscape is conserved and enhanced. And that goes back to some of the questions that the chairman asked about, are then the changes to the windows, would that conserve and or enhance the character of the landscape? So those are the issues that you properly need to get into. The chairman is correct that if you are so minded to grant planning permission for this, there would be that separate building regulations approval. But members are probing the right questions here, because you're questioning the extent to which this is a reuse and an adaptation. Indeed. Yes. Yep. So effectively, those are the issues that you need to interrogate and come to a judgment about.
Thank you. That's good clarification. I have got one eye on the clock, but I don't want to stifle any debate. Where are we? Somebody else. Councillor Bailey, you wanted the word.
Chairman, I'm a bit concerned because initially it was thought that the construction was too flimsy prior to the block work being put in. Flimsy being you have got a fibre cement sheet roof. Well, let's be honest, if it's going to be converted into a house, fibre cement sheet roof is not what a householder would want. So we can be absolutely sure that that roof will not stay on for long, and there will be an alternative roof put on. So really it comes down to the fact that you've got a few corrugated panels and a steel or metal structure, and that is just about all there is there from the original barn, which was considered to be of insufficient structure to be made into a barn. However, I'm guessing that the blockwork walls and the slab floor were done under building regulations. Is that right? Because it didn't need planning permission. If it was done, obviously it didn't need planning permission. But in my mind, this is just a progression of, they have a flimsy, or did have a flimsy corrugated metal fibre cement sheet structure, which they want to convert into a barn, or sorry, a barn, or a house rather. They put blockwood walls in and a slab floor to make it more substantial structure. And I just think this is a form of the next step along to get plan permission. But I actually think there's so little of the original structure, which was the corrugated iron structure, which is no beauty, with a metal framework and the fibre cement sheet roof. There's very little left of what was there. So in essence, it's almost a new structure and a new building, because so often in the past, when in my ward, I've asked planning officers, how is this barn or agricultural building of sufficient not quality, but actual structure to be able to be converted? And my feeling that this one isn't, prior to when the blockwork walls were put in. So really, very little of the original one is actually going to be in use, and I do have concerns over it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really struggling with this one, actually. It should be so straightforward. On paper, it looks very simple, but it really is difficult to know where to go with this. And obviously, that's why it's committee. What was I going to ask? Yeah, we've heard a lot. We know there's been a considerable history to this, with applications both being refused, both by the council and also on appeal. Without wishing to drag time on and to expect you to know the detail, at the end of the day, what happens to what matters to us and to a lot of people is the appearance of it and how it will affect the lie of the land and all the rest of it. Can we remember the previous applications that were refused, what the proposed external appearance was going to be like? Was it, for putting it simply, was it going to have this same sort of timber effect? Because I'm picking on the points that the ward member and some residents have made, that they can't see any change in this application compared to previous ones. Now, you may or may not know that. So while you're looking that up, I'll ask another question. Much has been said about not much has been said. There is it has been spoken verbally, but also in paragraph 38, it refers to following the sale of the agricultural land, and someone commented, I can't remember who it was now, but someone said that the building is in effect redundant. Well, that land may have been sold, but what else is it being used for? It must surely be agricultural. I mean, whoever owns it, I mean, it's not got houses on it, hasn't got anything built on it. So is it really relevant that that land has been sold? Because at the end of the day, it's a field with a barn in. And so that is sort of, I'm not absolutely sure if that is a sort of really relevant point. I mean, that's just going through my mind at the moment. And as I say, it really is a difficult one, and I suspect a few of us are probably struggling with this. But if we know the answer to that, how the external appearance compares to the previously turned down applications, that would be helpful, I think, please.
I think we're nearly there, looking over my shoulder. Meanwhile, Councillor Thomas wants to make some points.
I think I didn't look at them in detail. I think the previous applications were not full applications, but they were applications as to whether or not they could do it without planning permission. Am I right in thinking that? So I don't think the plans, the actual look of the thing in those applications is relevant. That's my understanding of that. I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten what it was now.
We have an answer, I think, indicated on what have we found.
Sorry, thank you. Having gone back to the most recent prior approval application in 2020, it does show very similar drawings drawn by the same architectural practice which you see those drawings there. It shows the revision of it shows which revision it is. It shows the same vertical timber cladding, existing roof covering and structure retained. So it's not a dissimilar scheme. So by way of example, if I'm looking at the proposed side field elevation, which is the bottom of the four drawings there, it's largely the same as is the one above it. And both the chairman and I are looking at the same drawings, and I think we're largely forming the same conclusions. So effectively, that's the history. Plainly, what we have here, and again, as we always say, judge this application on its merits. This is now a traditional planning application, and you're being invited to judge it on that basis and against policy 22.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas wants to come back, and then Councillor Gowan wants to speak.
I remembered what I was going to say. I think there's two things here. We're either deciding this under paragraph 2 of policy 22, and that is whether or not this is a replacement building or a conversion of an existing building. And then it goes on to paragraph 3. If we decide it is okay under paragraph 2, am I right in thinking that? So I think that's might be a quite helpful way to structure the rest of the discussion, to decide where we are with policy, with part 2 first, before we go on to part 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gowan.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I was going to speak to. I mean, I appreciate it is really difficult to know where we sit with this, but this is an old shed, as I understand. The outline structure of the shed is 25 years old. as somebody who lives in West Bridgford, it is amazing to see a plan like this, which doesn't extend anywhere on the outline of that building. I mean, this plan, to be honest, living in that building, it looks like it could be quite complicated to me. And I suspect that they've worked really quite hard to make it fit within the envelope of the barn. They haven't put any, roof lights in, they haven't put any extensions in the roof. There's nothing like that. It's just the existing 25-year-old envelope. So on that basis, I'm coming around to thinking this is, what's the wording? This is the reusing the existing building, not a new building, despite the fact there may be new walls and whatever.
I have no other speakers indicating, so I think we're coming to a conclusion. You'd like to speak?
Yeah.
Feel free.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I'm going to move the recommendation to approve. It's many barn conversions do have to be taken down right next to the footings. It's not unusual at all. In this particular case, looking at what we've got before us, bedrooms, windows in the side and everything, how it's going to look at the finish is to me quite acceptable in the middle of an agricultural field. It looks in keeping to me. So I am going to move the proposal to accept the recommendation.
You're moving the proposal. Have we a seconder to move? Councillor Gowan is seconding the proposal, which is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. So all those who are in favour of the recommendation to grant planning permission, please raise your hands. Sorry, no. Going away there. Six, was it? 6. Those against? 4. Motion's carried. Approved. Thank you. So we turn on to the next page, which is application 21/03219/full Christmas Cottage, Florforth Lane, Ruddington. The demolition of the existing dormer bungalow, garage and outbuildings and the erection of a replacement dwelling and detached garage, landscaping and associated external works, including boundary treatments and alterations to the access. So,
Just a brief moment.
have a brief moment while we set up here and some of the public depart, but thank you for attending. And this is Martin Clabou presenting. I hope I spoke that reasonably correctly. Welcome. So when Martin's ready, he will give us the presentation. 5:10, we're okay.
So firstly, there's a late representation of some CGI images which have been submitted by the applicant, which I put in on the presentation, and I'll say when they are. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to two mistakes on the report, which could potentially be misleading. On page point 33, it states that it is 249% above the potential minimum original. That should actually say 149%. So it's 249% off the potential minimum original. So it's still above our guidelines, but it's 149, not 249. I apologise for the error on my part there. Okay. And then also on point 53, slight miswording there. It states, in about the 3rd or 4th line down, there is no significant setback from 2 Florforth Cottage Main Road That's meant to just say from the main road. In other words, it's not set back by an access track. It's in line with the other elevations. Okay. Now, moving on from that, technicalities, I thought what might be helpful as we go through the assessment is just to try to give you a broad overview of how it's done, as it is quite a unique type of assessment, this, in a unique type of area. So first, this said site location, and floor fourth house is labelled there in red. And roughly, not quite precisely, but roughly the area around it, you could call the floor fourth lane character area. It's not actually in the Ruddington neighbourhood plan as that. It's not identified as that. But people talk about it as an area. And when we do an assessment, we assess it against the area as well. So I have mentioned that in the report, but broadly, it's that area there with a bit more to the west, and this is just sitting outside the village of Ruddington to the east. So I may come back to the slide, or you may wish me to come back to that slide if we could think of that as the character area roughly at the moment. And there's an aerial view. You can see it's surrounded by open countryside, and the majority of that is flat or very low-lying topography. And then this is a Google Street View, and it shows Christmas Cottage just there on the right, and floor fourth house just there on the left. So now this is, we're looking at the immediate plot of the cottage, and we start to look at the immediate street scene, i.e. what the houses are right next to it. There's floor fourth cottage there, that's a close-up of it. And then this is number 2 floor fourth lane, which is 2 doors down from floor fourth cottage. And it's that 1.5-storey dormer style. This is opposite, property opposite here. And then that's Orchard, which is just opposite, but 2 down. So there's only about 4 properties close to it. Would you like me to slow down or go back at all? Yeah, okay. So that's what I would class as the immediate street scene, i.e. what you can see pretty much straight from the house. And then these are the CGI images, which were kindly provided for late representations, try and give an impression of the development. This sit viewed as it would be straight on. Floor fourth house would be just to the left there. This sit viewed as you approach from you'll be coming out of Ruddington. You can see it's got the garage, flat roof garage at the front there. And then this is the rear elevation. So not overly visible from the, well, not visible from the street scene on the rear, maybe partially from the side, but it shows the solar panels, sustainability features on the front. And also these are south-facing windows, which you class as sustainable features as well. And this then is the overview plan. And that's the garage at the front there, it's floor fourth house. This is the plan here. It's more or less rectangular, but it's a slight inset there. There's back boxes here. There's a wildflower meadow here. And there's planned native hedging at the front here, sorry, in front of a post and rail fence. There's a new access, by the way. The existing access is here, and it's just been moved up to the centre of the house to allow access to that hard standing area there. And then this is the first floor plan. This also shows the green or the cedar roof. There's a slight offset to these balconies. There's a balcony here as well. And then there's this hit and miss timber screen here. So this is actually glazed behind here. And then there's a hit and miss timber screen with gaps just at the front here. And then this, I'll come back to that photo. This photo here is the street elevation. Now we don't condition these, but hopefully it does give a good indication of where the existing cottage is here, and then where the proposal would run along here. And then these are the plans and elevations. So it's viewing from the front here. Then this is floor fourth house. Here's the original in the red dashed, the existing property in the red dashed. That's the timber hitting the screens. And the side elevation has this balcony. I would call this a geometric design. And then here's the rear elevation again. And the side as it would face floor fourth house. So in terms of the assessment, this would be classed as a highly contemporary, innovative build. It's a new modern looking building. And that is allowed in the plans. Yeah, they're not restricted, they're allowed in the plans. There is actually more in the Rushcliff design guide on it than the Ruddington plan. They are tricky ones to assess because by nature, they're normally very different. And you're trying to assess, well, does it either fit in and blend, or does it contrast in such a way that the contrast works? Now, when we look at the actual design as it is, our judgment as a planning officers was that it was a very good design for the plot. The actual house in itself in that plot works very well. And so I would give that I'm going to be very cautious of using numbers here because I know you're homing to a +2, you know, a considerable weight for it. If you imagine some weight would be +1, considerable weight would be +2, and very substantial or very significant weight would be +3. I would say, yeah, this works in this plot here. The problem is design can't just stand by itself. It has to be held in the context of what's around it. And the first part of that context is the street scene. And whereas we felt that this does work as a house within the plot, we didn't felt, if you excuse me a moment, it worked within the immediate street scene, which is predominantly these 4 houses here. That you can think of that as if you're standing with your back to the property and you look up and down the street, which ones you can clearly see. Okay, and that their floor fourth house has it's not a designated heritage asset, but it has a historic character. So we felt it wouldn't fit with that. It's very hard to kind of imagine it on top of it, but it would be right next to that. And it is quite a tricky judgment to make because you're talking about a highly contemporary, innovative building being put next to it. Now, if we come back to this slide here, we felt that it doesn't fit within the street scene, and I'm going to call that a -3, given that very substantial weight. But I did feel, having spoke to councillors, having spoke to the applicant, having visiting the area, that it does fit within, excuse me again, the floor fourth lane character area. So along this area here, which is separate from the Ruddington village itself, but it is within the Ruddington neighbourhood plan, it's within the borders of it, there is this quite distinct character to the area of quite uniquely built individual housing. Now that's been done through various planning mechanisms, and it's not one which can directly translate into this replacement building in the dwelling in the green belt. So there's often a feeling of, well, if you can get that down the road from here, why can't I have that here? Well, in planning terms, they just can't translate in that simple way. But I do think it's worthy of consideration that there is something quite special about this area. However, unfortunately, in the Ruddington neighbourhood plan, it doesn't give it a character area. It gives, say, for example, Old Road on the village core, and then us as planners can work off that. There isn't one here, but I have tried to address it in the report by saying it's an area of unique individual houses. Now, a lot of them are set back from the road. A lot of them you don't actually see, or they're not up front and centre next to floor fourth house, one with a historic character. So I think there are valid thoughts and concerns about this area. And I would say on the whole, with some uncertainty, because it's not defined in the neighbourhood plan, that it does fit in the area. And I'm going to give it a +1 for that. I could give that, some weighting to it. The problem is I can't give it considerable weighting because it's not described in the neighbourhood plan as a distinct one. And so I can't directly tie it to a plan which hasn't been formally adopted. So we come now, so that's it on design grounds. And if you think of it in 3 parts: plot, street scene and character area, and it actually balances, it's actually more or less nil, 3 negatives, 3 positives. But with there being the uncertainty over this character area, I have to fall on the side that it can't be accepted on design grounds. We then add on the greenbelt issue, and notwithstanding the errors in the report saying it's 249, it is 149 above the original. That puts us quite firmly into the realms of having a significant impact on the openness of the green belt. And the applicant provided a detailed fallback position. However, the problem with the fallback position that they put through is this aspect here, this first floor aspect here, just here, you can't get that on the permitted development, so we can't allow it to transfer. We are reasonable when we allow permitted development to transfer to a full application. But with greenbelt assessments, the first floor is proportionally far worse than the ground floor. So in the opposite way to building, when it's cheaper to build first floor on top of the ground floor, it's flipped like that in greenbelt. It's far worse if it's up on the first floor there. So if you can see by the outline here, it does match to a degree. Yeah, and the garage is beneficial because it removes the roof, but it's this area here which causes the most significant impact compared to the original. So that's kind of the critical part. And because greenbelt is given such importance in national policy, that to me is a -3, something I give very substantial, or we would give very substantial weight for. Now, there is the aspect of very special circumstances where you could, as a committee, choose to override it. But we as planners couldn't see that currently there was anything that would allow it to override the impact on the green belt. So there's a bit of uncertainty on design, but on the green belt, we're quite firmly that this would have a significant negative impact. Within greenbelt policy, there's nothing which allows design to directly outweigh it. Within the Ruddington neighbourhood plan, unfortunately, this character area is encoded to allow it in some way, or to say that they want it an area of highly contemporary innovative buildings. The floor fourth lane character area, although a lot of locals seem to know it as an area, it's not defined then. It would be hard to weight very special circumstances based on something which isn't quite written down yet or codified. The only other real consideration is the MPPF in Chapter 12 says we should give significant weight to outstanding and innovative designs. However, on the flip side, and the policies can often conflict, in Chapter 13, it says we should give substantial weight to the harm of the green belt. So to us as planners, it's unfortunately not a finely balanced decision because of the green belt impacts. However, I think to be fair to the applicant, the agent, and the work that's put in, and the for Ruddington as a whole, there is something around this floor fourth lane character area, which it would be good to give a firm and clear steer for, either on this application or another way, because we do get a lot of applications in this area. If it was out of sight, it would probably be more likely to be approved. But I would like to raise the point is, do you want what we can consider a good design on the site Is it the fact that do we have to hide it from prominence for it to be allowed, or can we weight it by the character area, or do we in effect come back to the fact that it has a big impact on the green belt and it doesn't fit with the immediate houses? So as a last thing, I would just like to add the sustainability features for it. These have been incorporated and they've been put onto the landscaping plan. There's native hedging, there's a hedging retained around the side, there's the back boxes, there's a wildflower meadow here, there's a green roof here as well. There's solar panels and it's self-facing to collect light there. So I think there's a definite plus one or some weight that we could give to sustainability features there as well. I hope that that's given a good impression of how we've gone about the assessment and also how we tried to do justice to the work and effort that's been put into this design, and made clear what's quite a long report as well.
Thank you. It's now time to hear from the applicant, I believe, Mr. Steve Millett. If you'd like to take the chair. When you're ready, you can press the button, the light comes on, you've got 5 minutes, and then we inform you when there's 30 minutes left of your presentation. So whenever you like, it's seconds. I'm getting minutes. 5 minutes, 5 minutes and 30 seconds. We'll let you know when they're going.
Okay, just want to say thank you for your time. I know it's been a long afternoon for everyone, so I'll try and get through it very quickly. And also just want to say thank you for the collaborative approach from the planning officer. It's been a journey for me to get to this point. I'm from the village myself. I've got elderly family. My daughter's bought her first house in the village. The plan to move back to Ruddington and do a self-build has been a dream for a long time. So we've worked hard to get to this point. We've, with the energy prices and the drive towards removing the need for fossil fuel, that sort of influenced our decision to go along this route of building our own house and making it as sustainable and with renewable energy sources. The process itself, we sort of bought the plots, wanted to engage with planning and with the council to see what we could do to make it into a family home in that location. The house itself, as it stands, is tired. It's old, there's cracks in the walls. It's not quite derelict, and we could dress it up, and it'll still be a pig. It'll be lipstick on a pig. It'll be prettier, but it'll still be a pig of a building. Excuse the explanation on that one. It's my terminology. We wanted to go through pre-planning application. We couldn't, and with COVID and everything else, the only way I could get some engagement to discussion with planning was to go through a householders questionnaire. And I had basically a response, and I presented, could I do this with permitted development? Could I go 2 stories? All sorts of things, or this as a potential new build with a flat roof that would give me the volume of house to sustain a family. And the response was, as I expected, non-committal. I had a couple of verbal conversations asking about whether we can build something with a flat roof and with all the sustainability measures in there and with a green roof that should help us along the way. So that's how we got to the design. I engaged the architect and Red Sky on the basis of wanting a contemporary design, something that would stand out, something that would be good along the Flawforth Lane area. And on that basis, that's how we went ahead and considered the neighbours and the neighbours' views. With having a north-facing wall, we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting windows on there and all of those issues. So a couple of things I wanted to say was the neighbourhood plan, the Ruddington neighbourhood plan, about the character of the area. And I know Martin has touched on it, so I don't want to waste too much of your time. But we're looking at this as a specific character and outside of the Ruddington neighbourhood plan in that sense. And the houses, I've got a history of having been brought up in the village. There's what's known as the Dallas house. that was built a long time ago. It looked like Southwark. I remember it going up, and everyone had a comment on it, and it's now blended into the background. We're hoping the landscaping is going to blend out into the background. We're hoping that the hedging on the right, on the west, as you approach the house, won't impact the immediate street scene. And whilst I accept those few houses in the area are very immediate, but I think you take Flawforth Lane, it's a 61-hour road. Most people take it at that and greater, so you don't really notice it. And even when you're past ours going west, you see the big barns and the silos in the background. So it's a countryside area taken at pace, and it impacts very few people. And we've had zero objections from our neighbours. In fact, we've had support, if anything, more support than anything else. We strongly think that by developing the house as a new build rather than going down a permitted development route makes it more makes it a greater and more desirable property for the council to consider
30 seconds
versus a permitted development. And because we would go basically a larger build and we'd be reversing onto the road and those other things. So really, just very quickly to summarise on, I just ask the committee to place a greater weight on the sustainable quality design and the enhancement of the local area. With the cluster of houses and the individual identity, I'm going to be self-building it myself, and it ticks a number of boxes from that side for me. And I'm hoping the positives outweigh the negatives. I'm done.
Perfect, thank you. Right, we'll open the debate. Who wants to start the debate on this one?
Councillor Mason.
Councillor Mason, first up with your hand there.
Do we have a ward member?
Do we have another speaker?
Oh, yes. We've got a ward member there.
No, not on my sheet. I haven't got anybody. Not registered to speak, apparently. We are where we are. No? Not registered, I'm afraid. Sorry. I can't change the rules. The rules is rules, I'm afraid. However, that's happened. Just 1 second.
Perhaps might have tried to register and it wasn't. So it's a matter of
The telephone issue.
Yeah, apparently the difficulty with getting through to Dem Services this week. So
Difficulty with the telephones, I gather you experienced getting through to Democratic Services. So in view of that, I will say that you can speak. So sorry about that hiccup, but I think in the tradition of fairness, we'll let you have 5 minutes as the ward councillor. Thank you. Sorry about that, but you're right on my sheet, but there we are.
There's not a lot I can add now, really. Martin, as the case officer, is quite comprehensive. And also the applicant, that's very comprehensive. What I would like to add here, though, this area of Flawforth Lane, it is separate from Ruddington. And there's various houses down there that have been built over the years. And they're very good houses, individually designed houses, going back to the Victorian period and even earlier. The area also has, well, it doesn't stand anymore, but there was a early medieval church there, which stood on the grounds of a Saxon church, which stood there, which actually stood on the site of a Roman villa. So all this is all innovative building over the years for the last 2,000 years. The houses that you pointed out, which are very close, one next door right to the proposed development, they were small houses at one point. They've been added to and rendered and plastered and painted white over the years. I mean, yeah, they're okay. All these houses are by and large quite fine. But what I'm saying about the earlier houses that were built, the Victorian houses, the Georgian house, they're a design that lasts for a long time, and this particular house that the applicant is proposing to build is taking and building something that won't change. It won't change. It won't be able to be added to, and it's, like I say, quite I can't say the word, innovative. Just immediately across the road there's another house which is very similar to this, but it's just over the brow. It's just over the rise. You just can't quite see it quite well from the road. You have to look for it. And there's one about 100 yards down as well, which has recently been modernised, etc. And it's reasonably in the same style. It's just that this one, it just stands a little bit it just comes forward a little bit. I like it personally. It's built with, it's very well designed. I believe it's sustainable materials, which is a good thing. What more can I add? I like it. It's an area of houses or buildings that are outside of Rushcliff, and they've all benefited from innovative designs over the years. You know, and I reckon there's room for this as well. I can't see, well, I can't make that decision, but I think it'll stand proud. I think it's valid. It's quite valid. It's been pointed out. All right. So, I don't know.
Are you concluding there? I think the time is about right, is it? 2 minutes to go if you want to use 2 more minutes.
Well, there's not an awful lot.
Don't have to.
I do believe. Right. Okay.
Just
we'll get me going
now.
I do believe there's room for well-designed houses. Rushcliff Borough Council can learn a lot from well-designed houses. Yeah. So Rushcliff couldn't, you know, from, like I say, innovative, but you know, a lot could be learned from these. Oh God. Anyway.
We have a technical issue in front of me, but don't let it distract you.
Yeah. Like Benny Hill show, isn't it?
I'm hosting a live meeting.
We're trying to keep the live meeting rolling to the out there and not in the room.
A bit like a Benny Hill show, isn't it?
Gary, are you sure you've said what you want to say, or do you want to?
Pretty much, yeah.
Want to do it again?
I'm not exactly waffling
because of the disruption. I'll give you the opportunity to start again if you want.
I'm just trying to get those points across. As you know, I sort of understand, or I believe I understand, durable building materials. A lot of houses these days are built with block work, cement render, and painted white, or whatever the case may be, and they aren't going to last too long. I've got a personal thing against these, but this is a very nice house built with durable materials, and it's not exactly pushing the boundaries too far. It's just probably making them a little bit clearer. Do these houses that are built like this, there are 1 or 2 in Ruddington, there's quite a lot in Edwalton, but do they really need to be hidden away all the time? Sorry, yeah.
All done?
That's about as much as I can say, really. I mean,
thank you very much.
All right, okay.
That's good. Microphone off, please, if you could. Say thanks. They don't all work otherwise. How are we fixed? Yeah, Councillor Mason. How are we fixed on the left technically? Are you reasonably all right? Got the thumbs up. Good. You'll be on the streaming. So, Councillor Mason, I think you're first on to speak.
Right. Thank you. Well, there's a couple of things, but one is size. You said that it was quite a large house, if not tall. Is there? It's just in my brain that there was at some stage that you couldn't build something 50% or more bigger than the original building. Is that right? And is it 50% or is it more?
Yeah, that's permitted development.
Chairman, if I can try and answer that question slightly more in a broader fashion, but I promise I will get that. I think, given that you enjoyed me going back into the National Planning Policy Framework 10 minutes ago, if I take you to the National Planning Policy Framework on Green Belt, because it might provide a context, but I promise I will answer that question. Paragraph 137 says the essential characteristics of green belts are their openness and their permanence. So that's the starting point: openness and permanence of the green belt. If we then canter down to paragraph 147, perhaps a statement of the blindingly obvious, but inappropriate development is, by definition, harmful to the green belt and should not be approved in very special circumstances. It goes blatantly, the green belt is the green belt. Paragraph 148 then confirms what the case officer has said, that when considering any planning application, local planning authorities, i.e. yourselves this evening, should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt. So effectively, those are the starting points. Then, and this is where I get to the answer to the question, but I just wanted to give you that broader context.
That's the background.
Indeed, yeah. Paragraph 148 then says, a local planning authority should regard the construction of new buildings as inappropriate in the green belt. Exceptions to this are, and one of the exceptions is the replacement of a building, which plainly this is, provided that the new building is in the same use, which plainly it is, residential, and not materially larger than the one it replaces. So instead of broadly 2 hours ago, we're now into is not materially larger than the one it replaces. Chairman, I'll pause there and then I'll go into our local plan policy and see if that gives any specific percentage figures.
Do you consider it considerably or larger?
And therefore,
is it on the floor plan?
Indeed, and our conclusion is that this proposal is materially larger, and as you say, it's on both its floor plan and it's on its floor space.
Okay, right, I've got that.
Indeed, and Chairman, if I can pause there, but I'll probably come back in a few minutes when there's an appropriate pause, and I'll tell you what your own local policy says.
No, there was a lot of considerations and different things that were important. But I just think of, we can all think of where we live, and I live on Cotgrave Lane, and you've got every type of house along there, and it's a long lane. Most of the houses are all on one side, so, and it's all green fields the other. And I have a house that actually, it looks really quite decorative compared to the house that was built just up the road from me on the other side with just one other little house. It's a square block. It isn't even, quite like that. There's all sorts of houses, old, and to build that, they pulled down a big old traditional house. So they pulled down something that had been there a while and built this ultra modern thing. I quite like it. I'm not complaining about it. The other side, white, completely white, long white wall, big, with 2 semi-detached next door. So there is nothing the same along, my house is different. There is no 2 houses the same other than these 2 houses. So I find it a bit strange that on Flawforth Lane, you can drive along there, and I do quite a bit. And you've got big, little, small, large bungalows further down towards the, and such an array of different houses. I find it that you take a smaller area and say, but they're not all the same there.
Yeah.
That's the bit that I have a difficulty with, because I know you're going to tell me, well, there's this weighted and that's weighted, but those are my thoughts. I find that quite difficult to come to terms with, but we can all think of somewhere else where no 2 houses are the same. Okay.
Yes, if you could, my microphone, obviously there's too many on at them.
Chairman, thank you. And here's the answer to the detailed question about Greenbelt policy is set out in Local Plan Part 2, Policy 21. It simply, and very commendably, simply refers to the Greenbelt policy and the National Planning Policy Framework. So it effectively doesn't attempt to rewrite National Planning Policy Framework. It says we will adopt national policy. Plainly, it defines the Greenbelt, but it doesn't seek to do anything other than do it. Mr. Hilton has reminded me locally that there is a rule of thumb that a 50% increase in the volume or the floor plan of a existing dwelling might be considered to be not materially greater. But plainly you'll come to your own judgment here. Plainly, with the revisions that the case officer has given, we're in the territory of plainly significantly beyond that rule of thumb in any event. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my questions are really about that 149%. So is that metre squared on the plan, or is it metre cubed on the volume?
It's volume percentage.
Okay.
In the design and access statement, there was, which forgive me for not putting on the presentation, it had the potential, the original and existing and proposed volumes. And with the Greenbelt assessment, the key is original. So it is what it was as first built in 1948.
Yes, I did read all that stuff.
Yeah,
so,
and
yeah,
it's from that the volumetric expansion.
Right. So my next question really is how much that would set a precedent for other greenbelt developments in the borough, because my concern is perhaps not about the actual appearance of this one, but the fact that that would lay us open to any development that had this degree of increase in size being considered acceptable, because this one had been. Thank you.
Yes, good question.
And it looks like the fingers are pointing at me there, Chairman. But plainly, we go back to the old adage. I apologise if it's the fourth time I've said it this afternoon. But plainly, we've got to treat each application on its merit, and it's appropriate that you do that.
Yeah.
But I think Councillor Thomas is right to raise the issue that plainly, if you were so minded to grant planning permission for a development of this scale, which plainly, in our judgment, conflicts with that guidance in national policy, other people would no doubt see that as a potential sign. Now, plainly, you would have to determine those applications on their merits, but inevitably part of the government's guidance to us is that we've got to give considerable weight to national policy. Our own local policy reflects, it states exactly that we will follow national policy, and national policy says you give very significant weight to Greenbelt policy. So we go round in a circle. And it's effectively saying this is a critical element of the planning system. It's been one of the key planks of the planning system since 1947. Not that I can go back that far, but it is one of the founding planks of the system. And it's effectively maintaining the separation of key settlements in the East Midlands and elsewhere. So it's something that you give significant weight to. And effectively, and again, Chairman, you said it right at the start of the meeting, this is a quasi-judicial meeting, and effectively we should be in head territory rather than heart territory. And your heart territory might say, the applicant has come up with a really exciting building, and we all agree with that, but head territory would suggest that Greenbelt is Greenbelt, and you should give very significant weight to it, because the government says so, and we have adopted government policy in our own local plan. So, Chairman, I'm sorry that I go around the circle, but it's important to confirm the significance of your own policy.
That's fine. Thank you for that. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. The concern, I first of all must say that I think the sustainability that would come with a new build is brilliant. And I'm all for a variety of houses in a given area. My real problem is, if you look at the rear elevation, number 4, you can see the top of the wall is higher than the ridge tiles of the dormer bungalow. To my mind, it is one huge block. I have nothing against modern design. It's very innovative, but I don't know that this is the right modern design on this plot. And the reason I say it, if you look to the side elevation 3, look at the sheer mass and bulk. Right up, you can actually see the outline of where the dormer bungalow that is currently there, unless it's been demolished. I don't think it has. The sheer bulk, its sheer mass. I probably wouldn't object to this design if it had, if it was different and had sort of a ridged roof. But this is one sheer block. It's almost a monolith. It's a brilliant design in the right place. But I actually think it is solid. It's just a mass, and it's really shown to the full effect on the side elevation, which you'd see from both both sides, no matter which way you will be coming down Fourth Lane. So I have real concerns of the sheer bulk of it, not because it's modern. I think that you could have a wonderful modern design on this plot, but I don't think this is designed for this plot. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the recommendation, the first part of the refusal is that it is contrary to Local Plan Part 2, Policy 21 and the Greenbelt and Chapter 13. We've had all this evening, very carefully explained to us, and it does have significant impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. I do struggle myself with the second part, which is to me subjective. On design, I agree with previous speakers that, you know, you love or hate, and in the right place, they are okay. So on balance, though, I am happy to propose the recommendation that planning permission be refused for those two reasons. Thank you.
Have you got a seconder? I did cast my eye to Councillor Gallen, so Councillor Gallen seconded it. Thank you.
Right.
We're all done on our debate. It takes us to the vote. So the vote is about planning. The recommendation is planning permission be refused. All those in favour of that recommendation, raise your hand, please. Nine. Those against? Two, with no abstentions. So the recommendation of planning permission be refused is carried. Thank you.
It's now
It is.
8 minutes to.
I think we'll go for it, shall we?
If there's
I'd
one,
like to.
yeah, there's one speaker.
Yeah.
So if the planners could keep their application as succinct as possible.
Just had a little dialogue with the monitoring officer looking at the time. I would propose, in fact, I would recommend we extend to 6:30 to finish the business of today, which is the last item, is about a tree preservation order. There is, I gather, only one speaker. If we could keep the presentation really relatively crisp and to the point, and I think we can achieve it by 6:30 with a fair wind. So, without more ado, could we have the presentation from Mr. Ashcroft, is it again?
Indeed it
on
is.
the tree?
It is.
Sorry, I'm rushing you on the technical side.
No, it's okay.
I'm sure the tree will come up soon. This is about, I'll do my little introduction. This is all about 3 Cumbria Grange, Gamston. To get the details, this is planning application 21/00198/TORDER. 3 Cumbria Grange, Gamston. Objection to a tree preservation order. So that's the brief introduction. I'm sure we'll hear more on the presentation.
Chairman, thank you. And you'll be delighted to know there's very few slides. But I'll just, Joyce, you'll be delighted to know there's very few slides. But I'll just, if we could have the first slide, please, that shows the location. I think that's an interesting slide to the extent that it shows, as we'll see from some of the photographs, that effectively this is a relatively recent tree in a relatively modern housing estate. But I think that we just need to look at this application, look at this issue within the round, and move accordingly. Paragraph 8 is an interesting element. Page 1116, 116 for those of you with paper copies, 118 on the online copy. TPOs can be made when it's expedient to do so in the interests of amenity, and amenity isn't defined in law, but it's considered to be about pleasantness and attractive of the place. And effectively, this is the judgment that's been taken here. And clearly, whilst crabapple trees here, which this is, and we'll see photographs in a minute, are a relatively small growing tree, but due to its roadside location, sufficiently prominent to justify the protection which we have already given, we're here this evening because there's been an objection to it, and it's important that committee makes a decision. Just have the next slide, which shows the trees within their broader context. If you just pause there, because I think we're straying into some of the photographs that the speaker has asked us to show. But I'm sure the speaker wouldn't mind me just showing some of those photographs now, and then we can do it because the speaker's photographs are slightly better than our photograph. But if Martin will just move on to the next photograph, you'll see the relationship within the street scene. You'll see the age and the height of the trees. We go on to the next slide. We'll probably pause there. That just looks back at it from the other angle. You'll see its relationship with the boundary fence of the house to the, as it were, to the rear or to the right or to the back of those trees. And you'll see its broader context within the street scene, which I think perhaps highlight that issue that I raised about plainly these trees are not potentially as special as some of the other trees which we see with tree preservation orders on them, but in our view there's still an amenity issue, and inevitably they are still a tree and they still have some benefits both to wildlife, but in our view in this location certainly to the amenity of the local area. And Chairman, that's all I want to say, and we'll go back to the start of the speaker's slide so that when the speaker is ready, he can properly go through those.
Can you just hold that one for a minute there, the site plan? So I'm trying to see where the curtilage of the property is, where the trees are located. Are they within the owner's curtilage, or are they on, well, for want of a better word, the public highway?
Yes, and if we go to the first photograph, my understanding is that they're slightly in the public highway, as it were, so they're outside. Yeah. Yes.
So where they are, that piece of land with the trees on is public highway thing. Yeah, okay. So the fence is the boundary of the, yes. Well, perhaps the speaker can.
Yes, indeed, yes. Yeah.
Inform us on that. Thank you. Sorry, thank you. No. Switch yours off if you could. There we are. Right, the time for the speaker. Last one of the day, but nonetheless very important. David Hardcastle. I think you've probably seen in the afternoon the procedure, but 5 minutes, and when you press the button, it's yours. There you go.
Me, and apologies that it's taken you past your time, but I will be as quick as possible. So yes, as has been explained, what you'll see, let me introduce myself. I am David Hardcastle. If you go to the site plan there, I reside at number 30, Cumbria Grange, which is directly opposite the trees. As you can see, the drop curb there is my property. So I apologise for the homeowners and main objectors to the TPO not being present. However, they are out of the country at this time. So I'm here partly on their behalf, but partly on my behalf, as well as a resident and the main resident facing those trees. And I also object to the TPO. Reason being, I mean, the main application states that, as has rightly been mentioned, what it brings to the area and what it states in the application enhances the character of the road. Now, I do not, as a member rightly said in the first item about the barber shop, I overheard you say the sort of beauty is in the eye of the beholder and things change and whatnot. Those to me are not pleasant trees. They look nice 1 week of the year when they are blossoming. For the rest of the time, they are not pleasant to look at and certainly do not enhance the character of the road. I will, while I remember, that is not the border. The fence up to the pavement is the homeowner's border. So there has already been an application. I don't know if you have access to it or can view it. Planning application 21/02297/full, which will show that. So there has already been a planning application and has been granted for that fence to be taken to the pavement with the first tree that you can see there, which is double rooted and couldn't have a TPO put on it, to be removed. So the TPO application only applies to the rear tree, the rear crab tree there. Again, on the basis of it enhancing the road, in that application, the homeowner, myself, and 3 other resident neighbouring properties sort of objected to any TP on the trees at the time, and are in doing so, unfortunately, with the timing coming here, have been unable to offer support at this time. However, we know of another couple of neighbouring properties who are in agreement that these trees do not enhance the character of the road. What does is, we believe, as the residents and the homeowner's plans within that application, and if the rejection of this TPO is successful, potential further plans will actually enhance the character of the road. That is what they are intending to do. It's not like, it's not as if they are building a 20-foot concrete wall here. I know it is the removal of 2 trees, and I certainly would not advocate that. I will stand and say that. I don't like the removal of trees or anything of that ilk, but I do feel that the homeowners are planning to enhance their home and the local environment. And if the TPO is rejected, that I would hope, and any further planning application is made by the homeowners, I would hope that that can be discussed then. If there is a feeling that it would be lost, that can be discussed with the landscape and officers at that stage, if that were to occur. That's all I can think of in relation to the actual appearance of the trees. Then we come to other notes that have been made about its condition. I don't have the application that's been made, the point scoring. I believe in the notes it's been said that the tree achieved a 12 points out of 16, and it needs 11 points to be applicable for a TPO. So again, I'm not privy to that report, if one has been conducted, and the details of that.
I think we're out of time. Very close to out of time.
Yeah, no problem. So there is that as well. And over the points have been made about health and safety. Again, I haven't been privy to any form of risk assessment or any health and safety report for that tree. But again, fruit bearing tree, they're not in good conditions that I can see. And there are other
Thank you very much.
So
thank you for the points made. Very informative. And I'm sorry it's been such a long wait for you all.
No. It's been quite a learning process actually to be here. So
these things are unpredictable, just how long they take. But we do like to debate them as fully as we can.
Sure.
So apologies for being the end of the agenda, but nevertheless just as important. So thank you.
And if there are any other questions,
we'll now open it to you've got a point to make, Mr. Rushcliff.
Chairman, if I can just give members an update and correct my earlier assertion. Paragraph 1 of the report does say, as has been confirmed by the Speaker, that the tree is located on a strip of land owned by the above property, i.e. 3 Cumbria Grange, that separates the garden fence from the pavement. So effectively what you have there is that effectively the house owns up to the pavement, but the garden fence is positioned where it is and the trees are on the outside, because plainly the trees were planted within the ownership of the house, but in order presumably to give the amenity to the overall housing estate when it was built. And also, thanks, Chairman, just to confirm very briefly that there is now an extant planning consent that was granted permission last year for the demolition and replacement of corner walls and fence, with a new fence and the demolition of a shed and a new lean-to shed. And it was that application that generated the tree preservation order to safeguard one of those trees that's in a fit and healthy condition. So it's effectively that application that generated the identification of a tree preservation order, and it's now the objection that brings it for you to committee for a decision.
So not to labour it too much, the extant approval is being given for that piece of wall, presumably, and the 2 metre high or thereabouts timber fence to be taken away, and as you say, a new boundary fence along the line of the back of the pavement, such as the fence I can see in the distance. What I don't know is it likely to be
same height type of fence. So you get a fence, 2 metre fence, all the way along the back of the pavement. I mean, I'm sorry if you can't answer me.
No, it's okay. I can. I can think.
Because if that's been approved, then,
yes.
then it has. It is what it is. I suspect it probably is.
Yeah. So effectively, what it is doing is effectively relocating the garden fence.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. So you'd still end up with a garden fence, but the garden fence, as it were, goes then on the outside of the trees.
Everybody clear on that then? The fence is brought forward to the back of the pavement line and the 2 trees are behind the fence, but we are only looking at the far tree as a recommendation for a TPO, not the tree in the foreground. I'll open the debate up. Anybody want to start the debate? Councillor Thomas.
I'd like to move the recommendation, please, that the TPO be confirmed. I think the point here is that that's not going to prevent the tree being taken down if it needs to be taken down or any work being done to it. It's just putting a TPO on it so that the question has to be asked. And trees are innocent until proven guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more debate or have we a seconder? Councillor Bailey, second. So we have a valid proposal and second. There's no more hands up. So I think we'll move to the vote, if we could. Right, raise your hands if you are in favour of the recommendation, which is that a TPO be confirmed without modification. All those in favour? Nine. Those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Thank you to the speaker for coming and being so patient with us. That concludes the business for today. It's been quite a long session, quite a challenging session, I think, this afternoon. We've had some rather detailed and somewhat technical debate at times, but we got it done. We've done the business, and that's the main thing. So thank you very much, and till we meet again, as they say. Thank you.
Thank you.